On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 10.
Good morning, I'm Divya Kohli. Temperatures could top 40 degrees in England over the coming days, and extra measures are being put in place across the UK as Britain braces itself for record-breaking hot weather. New Health Secretary Steve Barclay says more ambulance call handlers and extra capacity for the 111 helpline are planned for tomorrow and Tuesday. Speaking to Times Radio, meteorologist Jim Dale from British Weather Services explains what makes this heat wave different from previous ones.
We're not used to it. It's as simple as that. Yeah. People and infrastructure. And while they say, yeah, we've been abroad and we've been at 40 degrees or we've been at 35 degrees, those countries are much more used to it. Their infrastructure is far more equipped to deal with it.
Meanwhile, wildfires are continuing to rage across Europe, causing thousands of people to evacuate. In Portugal, one pilot died when his plane crashed near the Spanish border. Several other nations, including Spain, France and Greece, are also dealing with fires. A Ukrainian plane reportedly carrying dangerous material has crashed in northern Greece, killing the whole crew. It happened yesterday near the city of Kavala. The cargo flight was apparently carrying explosives. Contenders in the running to become the next Prime Minister will go head-to-head again tonight. The 5 candidates will be taking part in another leadership debate. Writing in the Sunday Times, Kemi Badenoch is promising to do whatever it takes to deal with the small issue of boats. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak has vowed to scrap hundreds of remaining EU laws and regulations, while Penny Mordaunt faces scrutiny on trans rights. Speaking to Talk TV, former Downing Street advisor Alex Crowley gave his verdict on the contenders.
All of the front-runners have their issues. Rishi Sunak is essentially a vote for more of the same. Penny Mordaunt has trouble saying the phrase pregnant woman. And Liz Truss seems to me, certainly substance-wise, to tick a lot of those boxes. But it is unclear at the moment as to what her broader popularity might be in the country.
The Cabinet Minister who led the COP26 climate summit has indicated he'll resign if the next Prime Minister isn't fully committed to the net zero agenda. Alok Sharma is reportedly urging the candidates to proactively set out their support for it. The government has announced that all state schools in England will have at least one defibrillator by the end of the next academic year. Research shows that using a defibrillator within 3 to 5 minutes of a cardiac arrest increases the chance of survival by over 40%. And an official picture has been released to mark the Duchess of Cornwall's 75th birthday. Clarence House says Camilla will celebrate later today with a small family dinner. It's likely Charles will host the evening get-together and guests are likely to dine at Highgrove. Now time for today's weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
A fine and dry morning across much of the UK with plenty of very warm sunshine, but a cloudier start for Scotland and parts of northern England with the chance of a few showery outbreaks. Early cloud and rain will soon clear much of Scotland and northern England to leave a largely dry day with some warm or very warm spells of sunshine. A fine and dry day for Wales and central England with light winds for most, although a breezy morning for some parts, feeling very warm. Plenty of sunshine for southern England and the Channel Islands too, and feeling hot for many by midday. Winds will mostly be light, but it will become breezy in Cornwall, especially along the coast. Staying dry and sunny across most of the UK through the afternoon, and feeling very hot across much of England and Wales.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Danny in Ipswich, you're on the air. Danny, good morning.
I'm sitting here with my little Chihuahua dog on the sofa.
What a ridiculous thing to say. You do talk nonsense. Get to the point. So you don't like Boris Johnson, right?
No, I do not.
And a very good morning to one and all. Yes, it's just after 10 o'clock and it's time for Tice Talk here at Talk TV. And we have a huge 3 hours ahead. I hope we'll squeeze it all in. In the first hour, folks, we're going to be talking about, of course, the leadership candidates, the debate. What did you think of the candidates? Are they still telling the truth, or have they ever told the truth? That's what I'm going to be really digging into, and that's going to be part of my Sunday sermon. The discussion they had about tax, I think, was woeful. I want to get into that because this is absolutely critical to one and all. In the second hour, I'm going to be talking about some extraordinary scenes in the Oldham Council Chamber this week, looking at and voting on whether or not to have a public inquiry in the child sex exploitation case. We're going to be talking to Maggie Oliver from the Maggie Oliver Foundation. Do not miss that. That is an ongoing crisis and scandal that we must not lose sight of. We're going to be looking, obviously, at the odds, the polling on the leadership candidates. And, of course, I've got my snakes and ladders of the leadership campaign, and I want your views. Who's going up the ladder? Which ladder? And who's sliding and slithering down the snakes? What are the dirty tricks and what impact is that having on the competition? In the third hour, we're going to be talking about the latest in Ukraine, which is almost disappearing from our news pages. But we must not forget that because of the impact on all our food prices, the cost of living crisis, and the impact on Ukraine, of course, itself. And yes, it's a bit warm. Well, it is July. You know, it is July, folks. It's the middle of summer. Is that a surprise? So we'll be looking at some comparisons with John Hammond, the meteorologist, experienced weather forecast, looking at that. And yes, I'm going to be talking about Boris Johnson's disillusion honours list. Bit of chat just emerging about that, so we'll have a look at that. Who do you think should be on his honours list? That is one of my big questions to you. Who should be on Boris Johnson's honours list? Should there be many names, no names, or just one name? We've got great guests. We've got an MP from Ukraine. We've got top economists, many more. But, of course, I want your views, your input, because that is the best, that is the most important, and that's the most engaging. You know the number. It's 0344 499 1000. Text us 87222 using the word talk. That's it, the word talk. It's good to talk. Or, of course, tweet us at Talk TV. And I'll share as many of those as I can possibly get to. And, of course, you can watch us as ever on TV, on Sky, on Virgin Media, Freeview, FreeSat, on your apps. There really is no excuse, not whatsoever, not to be engaged. But first of all, stay with us at Tice Talk, because you know what's coming next. Yes, indeed. That lovely, lovely music on a Sunday morning reminds us that, of course, it's time for my Sunday sermon. And I thought, given the leaders' debate was asked a pretty searching question on Channel 4 about whether the leaders trusted Boris Johnson, my question is actually, well, do we trust these leadership candidates? And I want your views on that. Do you trust them? Are they telling us the truth? And I want to focus on one particular issue on its own, really, because all of them have said that they are pro-net zero. So I thought, well, let's examine the truth about net zero, shall we? And are they telling us the truth on this? Can we trust them on the climate issue, on net zero? Because I don't believe that they are telling us the truth about this. My view is, and we're seeing it now, the evidence elsewhere in the world, my view is that their quest, Westminster's quest, to what I call the Westminster net zero, is the greatest single threat to our prosperity, our jobs, and our ability to feed ourselves. Because the truth is, and they won't tell the truth is that net zero is not achievable, it's not affordable, and nor, do you hear any of them say this, nor would it make any difference to the thing that people are almost most worried about, the rise in sea level. It wouldn't make any difference to sea level rise for between 200 and 1,000 years. Even if we went to net zero tomorrow, you'd have to wait at least 200 years to have any impact on sea level rise. Do you hear this truth from these candidates? If you doubt me, go to the IPCC report, page 41, D1.6. That's where the evidence is. And the evidence is mounting at home and abroad. And my first guest, Lord Matt Ridley, will be talking about what's going on in Sri Lanka. The evidence is incontrovertible and it's damning. It's brutal. And for the eco-zealots, it's a bit embarrassing. Is it a coincidence that the electricity price rose 3 times faster than the gas price for 15 years between 2005 and 2010, when gas prices stayed about the same? Is it a coincidence that during that time, the amount of renewable energy generation in the UK went from about 1% to just under 30%? Do you see the link? The more renewables you've got, then guess what? Your electricity price goes up and up and up. Is it a coincidence that as we import ever more energy from overseas, that our prices go up? And by the way, do you hear from these politicians that the more we import, the more CO2 we're actually creating? Maybe if we used our own local energy, we were self-reliant on energy, we'd have the win-win. We'd have lower prices and less CO2. That's rather smart. And the evidence is there, isn't it? It's in the United States. Is it a coincidence that in the US, where they use their domestic energy, where they use their shale gas, that they have gas prices and electricity prices a fraction of ours? Is that a coincidence? Just by good chance, good luck? Of course not. It is the brutal truth. I know it's embarrassing for the eco-fanatics, but it's the truth. And then, of course, lots of people thought it was a really good thing that a country like Sri Lanka was the first country to go green, to go organic. They were given a score of 98 out of 100 on the Environmental Sustainability and Green Governance Index. Great. Fantastic. Well done them. 18 months later, the country's gone bust, they haven't got any food, they're rioting, and the president has fled. Is that really what we want? Is that really the benefit of going green as a nation? That's the evidence, folks. That's the harsh reality that these leadership candidates don't want to touch. Of course, they're obviously very worried because that guru, Alok Sharma, has threatened to resign as president of COP26 if any of them change their way on their objective to net zero. Let me tell you, I think it'd be fantastic if Alok Sharma resigned. But the truth is, no one would notice. No one would notice whatsoever. He's a complete nobody. Is it a coincidence that when EU nations like the Netherlands, like Germany, like Italy, as they've been moving more and more towards sort of green issues, that their farmers are protesting more and more because their livelihoods are being taken away from them? The Netherlands, for example, a huge exporter of agricultural products. I talked about it last week. Is it a coincidence that Germany is now facing energy rationing because it's not self-sufficient in energy, because they shut down their nuclear industry in favour of renewable energy, wind, and in favour of relying on someone providing gas from overseas? Is that all a coincidence? No. It's hard evidence that the greener you go, the more you go towards net zero, the more problems you're going to have, the more rationing you're going to have, the higher prices you're going to pay, and eventually nations go bust, bankrupt, zero. As I've said before, the only thing that is actually zero is the amount of money in your bank account. And so I'm saying to all of us, This is what we should be challenging these leadership candidates on. The truth about going towards net zero. I'm all for reducing emissions. We all care about the environment. We all want cleaner air. But here's the point, and we all want to do our bit. The truth is, though, that Westminster's net zero is the wrong bit, at the wrong price, in the wrong time frame. And what will happen is that we will send all our jobs and all our money overseas to countries like China. And what will they do? As they build ever more coal-fired power stations, they will literally look at us and laugh at how stupid and how naive we have been. Now, there is a little chink of light. Liz Truss has said that she's pro-shale gas, but then she said, but it can only happen with local consent. Well, there are ways to achieve local consent, but if you state it like that, in a sense, what she's really doing, it's a cop-out. She hasn't got the courage to say, it's in our strategic national interest to use our own energy, to use the £1 trillion worth of shale gas treasure under our feet. I'm very clear on this. Nations that go green, nations that go net zero, there's only one thing they go broke, and eventually they go hungry. Now, talking about truth, 3 weeks ago, I told the truth about the economic crisis that we face being the gravest since World War II. Have you heard any of these candidates telling it as it is, facing into the reality of the gravity of the situation? And have they put forward some really truthful, clear, bold, costed plans, detailed answers? No, you get vague waffle about tax cuts. You're not getting the truth. You're getting nothing from this lot. Zero. Niente. Zip. No detail whatsoever. They're either incompetent, they're either naive, or they're not telling you the truth. Heaven help us all. Heaven help us all. Because you won't get any help from this lot. And here endeth my Sunday sermon. Well, there we have it, folks. I want your views, your thoughts about the truth and trust. 0344 499 1000. I'm sorry to be so grave and serious on a Sunday morning, but this is the reality. This is what we need to know. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to Lord Ridley, Conservative peer and author, about why Sri Lanka has gone bust. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk here on Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. Well, we've had our Sunday sermon and the texts and the messages are coming in. And Richard, another Richard, he wasn't very impressed. Richard says, listening to your sermon, you're talking total rubbish. The only people allowed to challenge the candidates is the MSM, who are on the same agenda as the politicians. What I was trying to say, Richard, is actually, of course, the 150 or 200,000 Conservative members, actually, they can challenge the candidates in the sort of the hustings, the final runoff, and they can write to their MPs. So I think there still is time. That was the point I was trying to make. But I was also making the point that are any of them telling the truth about the impact of rushing towards net zero? They all seem very keen on it. And about the evidence emerging, for example, in the first nation to go green being Sri Lanka. And I'm delighted now to be joined by the retired Conservative peer, author, Lord Ridley, who wrote an article in The Telegraph just 2 days ago about what's really going on and why Sri Lanka is having the crisis, the economic crisis that it's experiencing tragically as we speak. Lord Ridley, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining me on Tice Talk. I know you've got a manic day, so we'll crack straight on into it. You wrote a brilliant article entitled Eco-Extremism has brought Sri Lanka to its knees, from being one of the fastest growing Asian economies to an economic and humanitarian horror show. And how's this happened? I mean, they were sort of extolled as being, a leading, shining example, and yet it's all gone horribly wrong.
Yeah, well, morning, Richard. It's a very interesting story, I think, and I don't think most of us are getting the full facts, because it's being reported as sort of economic mismanagement, a foreign currency crisis, and there's an element of truth to that. But what really lies behind it is that when facing a shortage of foreign currency in early 2021, the president of Sri Lanka said, I know, let's ban the import of chemical fertilizers and pesticides because we want to go organic anyway. And he was told by the environmental movement, particularly people like Vandana Shiva, that's great. You'll actually be better off environmentally, but you'll also be better off economically, because the synthetic fertilizer is the road to ruin. It's a disastrous thing. In fact, what happened when they banned the import of synthetic fertilizer was that the tea yields collapsed, the rice yields collapsed. Tea is an incredibly important export commodity for Sri Lanka. Rice was something they were self-sufficient in, but suddenly they had to start importing it. So both of these meant that their foreign currency crisis got worse, not better. They discovered that you do need fertilizer. And the whole miracle of what happened in South Asia, in India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, from the 1970s onwards, was based around getting fertilizer into agriculture so that the yields could go up, so that famine ceased, etc. And there's been a fight back from environmentalists saying that's a mistake. This has tested that hypothesis and proved it to be badly wrong.
I mean, this is extraordinary, because what you're saying is you've got decades of evidence of increased food yields, productivity of food, and therefore hundreds of millions of people essentially being able to eat more. And yet, the moment the environmentalists have an experiment to go the other way, all of a sudden it's brought a previously sort of relatively prosperous country to its knees.
Yeah, and it's more than just the agricultural sector, because remember, this was Sri Lanka was being feted as a pioneer through this policy. Environmentalists were welcoming it. But also on the ESG criteria for investment, Sri Lanka was way up the top. It was scoring 98 out of 100 because of this policy. So I think people have to rethink this. I mean, I'm an environmentalist. I'm extremely keen on the environment. But I think if we use fertilizer, we need to plow less land. And therefore, we can spare more for nature. It would be an absolute catastrophe to try and go organic for the whole globe. We were organic in the 1950s, and we needed roughly more than twice as much land per person to feed the world. We've now got twice as many people, so you can just see what would happen if we abandoned synthetic fertilizer. And yet it's one of the things that the European Union has been campaigning for less fertilizer use. The Netherlands government has set off a riot because of this, etc. So it's an important part of the debate. It's different from the energy debate, but it's an important part of the environmental debate, which I think the extreme environmentalists have at last had a chance to see what effect their policies would have, and it would be disastrous for nature as well as for humankind.
I mean, obviously, it's disastrous for Sri Lanka, but what you're really saying, as I said in my intro, we all care about the environment, but we've got to be smart about the way that we use fertilizers, for example. You know, since the 1950s, life expectancy, particularly in third world countries, has increased massively. That's not a coincidence, is it? It's because actually they've got more food, more availability of food at a price that is that works.
Well, globally, famine has largely gone extinct. I mean, except for places like North Korea, where the politicians start a famine pretty well on purpose, we don't have famines these days. That was not what was predicted. The environmentalists, when I was young, were saying that famine was inevitable because of the population explosion. Population is still going up. We're going to have 8 billion people shortly, but we've never been better fed as a population. And we've used almost the same amount of land as we were using in the 60s, a little bit more. And if we weren't growing biofuels on the recommendation of environmentalists, we'd be using a lot less land, actually. So we need to have a sensible conversation about how you minimize the impact of human beings on the planet through technology and innovation. Because what is synthetic fertilizer? It's the air. You take the nitrogen out of the air using a factory, combine it with natural gas to make ammonium, and use that to make fertilizer. So actually, it's a great idea to use the air to make plants grow faster so that you can have better yields. We're using 68% less land to produce a given amount of food as we did in 1960. That's really good for the planet.
So then, Lord Ridley, you could actually end up with a real win-win situation where you're using fertilizers smartly, sensibly, so that you've got abundant food, cheap food, but also then actually you're protecting sort of less producing agricultural land or other land for conserving and protecting the environment. I mean, that's the win-win, but why don't the eco-extremists realise that?
Well, I mean, to be fair, there are things we could do to use fertilizer more efficiently, to put it on in a way that gets absorbed by the plants and doesn't run off into watercourses and things like that. So, and actually using genetics, the biotechnology to make the crops better at absorbing fertilizer so that you don't have to put as much on, etc. And in fact, there are ways through biotechnology that look very promising, whereby we could put nitrogen-fixing bacteria on and so on. So, there's lots of ways that we could end up reducing the amount of synthetic fertilizer we have to use and still having high yields. And actually, but the one thing that wouldn't work is just going straight organic.
There's just been a message come in whilst you've been talking saying that plant-based food uses less resources and can actually generate sort of more wealth.
Well, you see, again, the problem is if you are using organic agriculture and you want decent yields, then you need a lot of manure. So you can't go to an entirely plant-based system. Veganism and organic agriculture don't go together. What are you going to do with all these cattle that are producing all this manure?
There we are. Lord Ridley, thank you so much indeed for sharing that with us. That's been absolutely fascinating. That's Sri Lanka's crisis. Stay with us. We'll take your calls. It's Tice Talk here on Talk TV.
What was my biggest career moment? After spending about 25 years in Fleet Street, there's loads of stories I could tell you. But actually, I think I did an overnight show for Talk Radio in the early days, the night of the Brexit referendum. And that was actually quite a milestone because, of course, we started off thinking that Remain had won. And at 2:30, 2:45, after Nigel Farage had already said he'd lost, it turned out he hadn't lost. And it turned out we were leaving the European Union. So that was quite a shocker.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. It's just after 10:30. That was the retired Conservative peer, Lord Ridley, with his views about what's gone on in Sri Lanka and why, tragically, the experiment of going completely organic, not using fertilisers on their agricultural industry, their huge export industry, has been absolutely catastrophic, absolutely disastrous for Sri Lanka. There's no point getting high scores on environmental and sustainability indices if you run out of cash and you can't feed yourself. It is as simple as that. Lots of messages coming in here. We've got one here from BBK who says, Richard talking a lot of sense. I nearly read that as nonsense. Fortunately, it says a lot of sense in his Sunday sermon about net zero. We need a new strategic interest to move the UK away. We don't want to go broke. Quite right, too. We're going to take the first call of the morning from Berkshire, where Toby is. Morning, Toby. What's on your mind? How are you doing?
Morning, Richard. Yes, very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, well, I'm all right, given everything that's going on.
Well, yes, it's something, isn't it? You've mentioned something a few times which I think is very interesting, and that's ESG. ESG is not really very widely understood by a lot of people, but I would really encourage people to read the work of James Lindsay, who talks about this a lot. He has a podcast called New Discourses, which is excellent. ESG is essentially Leninist Marxism. It's control of businesses, it's control of commerce, it's control of their activities. And it is, if you like, if you've ever been to Wall Street in New York, there's a statue of the bull. It is the ring through the nose of the bull, which then allows corporations to be controlled.
Toby, just to remind our listeners, ESG stands for
environmental, social and governance. So think of it this way, I think of it very simply. E, environmental, is your business pouring money into climate change dogma. S is your business funding woke social justice causes in the name of equity. G, governance, is your business allowing unaccountable and unelected people who are uninvested to be part of the business decision-making processes. And this happens not only in businesses, but it also happens in countries, as has happened in Sri Lanka. This is a front for Marxism because it allows utopian control of economies to be able to take place. Marxism doesn't work. It's an offshoot from communism, which is responsible for the deaths of 100 million people globally. It's an evil ideology which should not be allowed to even be discussed, never mind actually put into practice. But it's utopian. People never think of the consequences of these things. It all sounds great. It all sounds brilliant. We'll all share and we'll all sing Kumbaya in the street and eat our organic food and everything. Unfortunately, unless these things are done properly, they don't work.
Well, that's right. And it's when you look at the evidence, isn't it, Toby? You look at the evidence and sadly you carry out an experiment on a whole nation like Sri Lanka and the evidence is brutal.
It's absolutely brutal, but we already know about communism and Marxism that they don't work. We've got 100 million people who are dead to prove that already. We know this doesn't work, and we know that capitalism is the only system that works. Capitalism cures everything. The market will always find a way to get around any challenge that exists. Human ingenuity, human inventions, humans in general, their minds are amazing. We can set our minds to anything. We can solve any problem that comes to mind. We do not need to try failed ideology.
That's right. I mean, and I'm a great fan of markets. You know, I think if they are left completely free, then at some point they always overreach themselves. I think they've got to be sensibly regulated. But it was interesting, you know, actually Lord Ridley was talking about the smart use of fertilisers so that you can try and get a win-win of plentiful, cheap food supply, but also protecting the environment, for example.
Absolutely, but that's conservative in its nature. Conservatives should conserve. We should conserve and protect the environment. All of this is nothing new. We should always be protective of what we have and make sure that we protect and preserve to pass on to the next generation. This is conservatism in a nutshell.
You're like this, Toby, whilst we've been talking. Brexit Duck has just tweeted in, Richard, plant-based food is okay on my plate next to a nice, juicy, large steak. That sounds delicious. Toby, that's very helpful. Thank you very much for those thoughts there. That was Toby from Berkshire with his concerns about, it all sounds very nice and fluffy in practice, ESG, and lots of firms are sort of practicing it. I've actually been on the wrong end of it. But in reality, the evidence is that if you don't do it sensibly and smartly, then it can lead to catastrophic results. Let's head from Berkshire to Essex, where Dave is on the line. Morning, Dave.
Good morning, Richard. Thanks very much for taking my call. It's always a pleasure to speak to you.
And to you too.
So if I could raise 2 points.
Go for it.
I watched the debates the other day, and I've got to tell you, I must say, the best out of the bad bunch, I've got to say, is Rishi Sunak. He's the only one up there that seems to know what he's doing. He's got a grip of the brief, and all the rest of them. This woke woman, and just because someone is an ethnic minority, this is not the basic.
Okay, so I mean, no, look. Sunak is a grown-up. There's no question. He's serious. He's competent. But look at his track record, Dave. You know, he's raised taxes to the highest levels for 70 years. We've got record government spending, and he's not exactly selling us, you know, living the dream, living any hope. I mean, he's basically consigning us to a high-tax prison for as long as his premiership.
Yeah, but let me try and explain the mechanisms of how all this woke business works. Rishi Sunak was placed into an impossible position that the only way out of the corner that all this COVID and all this stuff had put Rishi Sunak in, the only way out of it was with socialist remedies. His hands were tied. But what I'm saying is this: if Boris Johnson had a turnaround and made it part of his manifesto that he was going to double my fuel bills by half, it would engage this country into a regional conflict with Russia and Ukraine and start sending them billions while our own nurses are living on the breadline. He would have never have got my vote. Anything as drastic as zero growth or zero net, whatever they're calling it this week, should go to the country. People should be allowed to vote on this, and whether they want to not just go off to COP22 with their champagne socialists and their hooray Henrys just to look good. Carrie Johnson swanning around in her latest two-piece knit. You know, I'm sick and tired of these people doing the absolute opposite of what I voted for.
Well, yeah, but anyway, Dave, I hear what you're saying. I'm surprised that you're happy with Sunak's tax plans. But thank you nevertheless. That's Dave in Essex. There's no question. Rishi Sunak is a serious, competent, capable, experienced individual. But do you like his plans? Do you want to pay ever more taxes? Where's his chat about cutting wasteful, unnecessary, bloated government spending? Zero, niente, nothing from the man. Let's see what Charles in Bagshot says. Morning, Charles.
Oh, hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Pleasure.
The one thing that really annoys me is the lack of basic economic understanding. In fact, total economic illiteracy of all the candidates, not obviously in all parties. The one thing that really annoys me, the one saying, even more than hard-working families, is unfunded tax cuts. There's no such thing as unfunded tax cuts, just bloated, useless government spending and poor organisation. Housing was the other thing in the debate. Again, they're pouring more money into the supply of money for housing and not addressing the fundamental issue. It just infuriates me.
No, you're absolutely right. Well, on tax, my next segment with Justin Urquhart-Stewart, Charles, is going to be looking at the tax, because I'm with you. I think the tax debate was utterly woeful. I mean, completely incoherent. You know, all Sunak says is that if you cut a pound of taxes somewhere, you've got to raise a pound of taxes elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, just... Yeah, I mean, yeah. Just hopeless. On housing, then, what would you like to be hearing and seeing?
Okay, here's me. I'm never going to own a house, so that's my fault. But I'm a tenant, right? And this will stun a lot of people. My first plan is we'd need to help with the rental market. So scrap this, reinstate the ability for landlords to put as an expense their mortgage interest. 2, scrap all taxes on landlords and just make it a fixed 10% on rental income, end of, period. I'd like to make it 0, but let's just make it a 10%.
And what will that achieve, Charles?
That will stop landlords deserting the market. It will bring more people into the market. I mean, what I'd like to see, when I lived in Chicago, there were loads of apartment complexes that were managed by companies that invested, and it was easy. Anyone could get housing. Housing was not an issue in any of these.
It's an interesting point. But the difference, though, Charles, is that what we're not doing is building enough houses, I would argue.
Yes, I agree with you, but
you're right. What you're saying is
landlords is not helping.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm going to have to go to a break, and then we'll talk about tax. Charles, thank you so much for that from Charles. He wants a better discussion on tax. We're going to have that straight after the break. You're listening to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We are well into the first hour. My Snakes and Ladders leadership race I'll be coming to later, but it's quite clear there's quite a lot of support on the messages and the tweets. A bit of support actually for Tom Tugendhat. We heard there from one of our callers support, I was surprised I have to say, for Rishi Sunak as the serious individual. Here's the difference compared to last week, folks. It's 10:45, not a single message of support so far for Penny Mordaunt. A week ago, she was rushing up with a turbo. With a turbo, she was rushing up my ladder to the top of the leaderboard. Zip this morning. Absolutely nothing at all. Fascinating, fascinating stuff. So keep those coming in. Your thoughts on the leadership race. We'll go back to that later on. But my concern on Friday night, and of course there's another debate tonight, was about the completely feeble discussion on tax and growing the economy. Almost no discussion about growing our way out of the crisis. And that's why I thought I'd get a proper expert, a grown-up, someone who really understands how the economy works. And who better than the co-founder of the regional investment platform? Yes, Justin Urquhart Stewart is with me on the Zoom. Justin, a very good morning. Thanks for being with us on Tice Talk.
My pleasure, Richard.
Glorious braces, as always.
Of course. Pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me on.
I hope we can hear you. I can't hear you, but I'm hoping that others can hear you.
I can definitely hear you. Let's just checking all the bits and pieces.
There we are.
Theory, yes.
Keep talking near the screen, and then hopefully we've got you. So, Justin, what did you think about the quality of the debate about growth and tax on Friday? Did anybody at all impress you?
I was quite appalled by the level of, frankly, ignorance. Just playing to crowds, coming up with, I can to do more. My tax cuts are bigger than your tax cuts. It was like being in the playground all over again. And even from the Chancellor as well, or the ex-Chancellor, actually understanding how do you drive the economy. What are the levers to pull? Cutting taxes doesn't start anything. What you need to be able to do, and you mentioned it just now, that vital word, it's growth. And so I want growing. How do you do that? If you have an economy that's getting bigger, then funny enough, you're going to get more tax income. Stone me, this isn't that difficult. And there are lots of things you can do to actually encourage that growth. For instance, not by spending more money or even getting more tax in, but encouraging the tax breaks for investors and also for entrepreneurs setting up businesses and building and growing capital. We know that works because every time it's happened before, actually businesses expand. You get more income coming in. If you just tax it, all you're doing is just going to be strangling the economy and actually making life much more difficult.
That's right. And yet the ex-Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, I mean, he's basically saying steady as she goes, even though we've got the highest taxes for 70 years, we've got the lowest growth forecasts for a very long time. And he's not even talking about cutting out wasteful government spending. I mean, the plan I put forward involved dramatically cutting unnecessary back office government spending, and that would be enough to pay for the tax cuts.
There's an awful lot of wastage. You only have to look at some of the issues where quite deliberately in the 60s they moved areas to try and encourage jobs in Wales and things like that. For instance, the passport office and those sort of areas. A lot of this can now be automated and actually made far more efficient, as we're seeing at the moment, with delays over things like driving licence, passports, all those elements. So technology can help there. But the key issue that none of them are focusing on, where is the growth in the British economy, the underlying growth? The answer is it's through technology businesses. They're not all in London. In fact, most of them are outside London. So if you're really interested in levelling up, actually what you do is you focus on, they've all got those tedious titles like Silicon Beach, Silicon Gorge, Silicon whatever you like. Basically, these are hot hubs of technology. And once they start, they breed. And you'll find them in most areas where you've got really, really good internet access. And that's actually the sort of infrastructure I want to see in place. That will encourage businesses to start, and they will grow.
And now, in fairness to Sunak, realising I think that he's got a problem in terms of how he's positioned himself, he has today started talking about slashing EU regulation, unnecessary regulation that is a sort of a brake on growth and that hinders growth. My simple observation is, though, Justin, he's been in the cabinet for the last few years. Why hasn't he been doing this since we left the EU?
It is astonishing, isn't it? You would have thought someone would actually say, look, here's a list of all the things that we could actually get rid of. This is why we left the EU. Well, show us what you're going to get rid of, and so we can see how quickly that can be done. Here we are, 2.5, 3 years later, and there's nothing obviously coming through. So if you can't find much to try and actually cut, well, look harder. But if you can't, and focus on something else, something which will actually then make sure this can become a much more productive economy. Remember, the past 10 years, we were becoming increasingly unproductive. We weren't very efficient. Where you put the infrastructure, where you put the high-tech internet and speed and high-speed networks in place, you get greater productivity coming through. Remember, we do more setups, more entrepreneurial setups in this country than France and Germany put together. Where we're really bad at is actually taking those baby businesses and growing into large ones. We give them to the Americans and to the Germans who actually are willing to put money into it. We don't.
Indeed.
And that I find pathetic.
But I think this idea that I'm always saying that if you cut taxes, you put money in people's pocket, they will always spend it and invest it more wisely than a civil servant. And it seems no one's really saying, look, if you cut taxes in the right areas, you'll create more growth, you'll create more investment. You've just been touching on it. That will create growth, and growth creates tax revenues. I was a bit surprised to see someone like David Smith in the Sunday Times today. He was saying that that's a myth.
And that's really stupid. It's not a myth. I haven't read his column today. We know from previous examples with smaller businesses, we started 30 years ago, actually up in Glasgow, not very well known for its entrepreneurial roots, but that's where that market came from, to encourage local money into local business. Now, let's be clear. First of all, is there enough money around? There is shed loads of money around waiting to be invested. Not government money, but private money. But there's no mechanism to enable me to invest in a startup business around the corner and be able to invest in local businesses. We had, I know we've talked about this before, there were in 1945, 45 stock exchanges in this country. Wow. Most of them were useless, run by syndicates and red braces. But actually the concept of the last 7 of them, which was actually Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, Bristol and Birmingham, the obvious choices, they attracted investment, not just local, but actually from other regions as well, and also internationally. Instead, what we've done is have greater focus on London, which is more expensive, and lo and behold, actually find themselves not very cost effective. So there are simple things they can do now. So encourage people in terms of a tax break to investments. They can actually have better capital gains tax relief on that. Encourage more tax incentives for building in new plant and productivity and technology. They've done some of that. But really you've got to make that right at the cutting edge of it and encouraging businesses to come here, because we've got the reliable technology-based expertise and people to do it.
But I'm a fan also, Justin, of simplifying tax. We have got the longest tax code in the world. I mean, it's 4 times longer than the combined works of Harry Potter and a lot less fun to read, I can tell you. I just, at the end of the day, simple, low taxes, you look at countries like the US, like Singapore, they've got a much lower tax take than our country, and guess what? They've got much higher growth.
Yeah, I didn't just look at it. And we've got, I don't know if you have for reading excitements, Tolley's tax guide ain't it, but I believe it gets the accountants very excited at night. Basically, we had about 13,000 pages of that. Since we've had the Office of Tax Simplification, I'm being very unfair, it's added another 2,000 pages. We have made it more complicated than necessary. For example, national insurance and income tax are the same thing. It's a tax on income.
Yes, of course.
And if you were to look at the minor taxes, well, there are only a few main taxes. VAT, national insurance will give you the most of it. And even corporation tax actually is relatively small, coming at about 50 billion overall. And then you've got lots and lots of tiny taxes, all the sin taxes coming through there. And so that's what we focus on then. Simplify it so everyone can understand it. And funny enough, when you simplify it, people actually pay more tax. Why? Because they can understand it, it's straightforward. I don't have to do more avoidance. Because it's
that's right. And just whilst you've been on there, Justin, Steve has just messaged in, don't just focus on technology without being the right tech, and stop selling valuable tech businesses like ARM to foreign companies.
Absolutely. And these are fantastic businesses, homegrown here, done well. But, name major technology businesses in this country which are British. And the answer is very, very few indeed. You look at those tech bases, mostly around the universities. You've got hubs already there.
That's
All
right.
you need to do is give tax breaks, not money. The government does not have to spend any money. The government can actually get more tax of those businesses being successful. So actually tax them once they're successful. Don't just go.
So, Justin, I'm going to put you on the spot. So far, who do you think understands this the most amongst the 5 candidates?
I don't know, probably amongst the 5. It's getting pretty difficult, bearing in mind that until 2 weeks ago, I hadn't heard of some of them. I certainly couldn't actually identify them.
I need a name, Justin.
I'll give you the Chancellor, because at least he was in the job for a few months. But the rest of them, I can't see it. The person who takes common sense, I think, is probably Tom. And that, to me, sounds quite logical. What his main thing is, I am not the expert in it, but I know people who can. What you need is some discipline in order to bring that in.
Fantastic. Justin, thank you so much indeed for your thoughts. That's Justin Urquhart-Stewart, co-founder of the Regional Investment Platform, with his thoughts. Lots and lots of messages coming in. One here from A says, Penny Morden's been totally undermined. and that the Lord Frost interview started the rot. Another here saying Sunak wants to be Prime Minister so he can cover up the complete mess he's made of our economy. We'll see. Stay with us. We're going to be, after the break and the news, talking to Maggie Oliver about what's been going on up in Oldham. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 11.
Good morning, I'm Divya Kohli. Temperatures could top 40 degrees in England over the coming days, and extra measures are being put in place across the UK as Britain braces itself for record-breaking hot weather. New Health Secretary Steve Barclay says more ambulance call handlers and extra capacity for the 111 helpline are planned for tomorrow and Tuesday. Speaking to Times Radio, the chair of the NHS Confederation, Lord Victor Adebowale, shared his concerns.
The NHS will cope, but coping isn't good enough. We need to be actually operating in a way that allows people to get the treatment they need where they need it in good time, and that's a struggle, right?
Meanwhile, wildfires are continuing to rage across Europe, causing thousands of people to evacuate. In Portugal, one pilot died when his plane crashed near the Spanish border. Several other nations, including Spain, France and Greece, are also dealing with fires. Contenders in the running to become the next Prime Minister will go head-to-head again tonight. The 5 candidates will be taking part in another leadership debate. Writing in the Sunday Times, Kemi Badenoch is promising to do whatever it takes to deal with the small boats issue. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak has vowed to scrap hundreds of remaining EU laws and regulations, while Penny Mordaunt faces scrutiny on trans rights. Energy Minister Greg Hands believes Sunak is best placed to deal with the cost of living crisis.
Rishi understands the energy issues the best of all of our 5 candidates, and those are going to be making the important economic calls over what could be a very difficult year to come, that I think will be the most distinguishing feature in this contest.
The Cabinet Minister who led the COP26 climate summit has indicated he'll resign if the next Prime Minister isn't fully committed to the net zero agenda. Alok Sharma is reportedly urging the candidates to proactively set out their support for it. A Ukrainian plane reportedly carrying dangerous material has crashed in northern Greece, killing the whole crew. It happened yesterday near the city of Kavala. The cargo flight was apparently carrying explosives. The government has announced that all state schools in England will have at least one defibrillator by the end of the next academic year. Research shows that using a defibrillator within 3 to 5 minutes of a cardiac arrest increases the chance of survival by 40%. And an official picture has been released to mark the Duchess of Cornwall's 75th birthday. Clarence House says Camilla will celebrate later today with a small family dinner. It's likely Charles will host the evening get-together, and guests are likely to dine at Highgrove. Now time for today's weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
A fine and dry morning across much of the UK with plenty of very warm sunshine, but a cloudier start for Scotland and parts of northern England with the chance of a few showery outbreaks. Early cloud and rain will soon clear much of Scotland and northern England to leave a largely dry day with some warm or very warm spells of sunshine. A fine and dry day for Wales and central England with light winds for most, although a breezy morning for some parts, feeling very warm. Plenty of sunshine for southern England and the Channel Islands too, and feeling hot for many by midday. Winds will mostly be light, but it will become breezy in Cornwall, especially along the coast. Staying dry and sunny across most of the UK through the afternoon, and feeling very hot across much of England and Wales.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Danny in Ipswich, you're on the air. Danny, good morning.
I'm sitting here with my little Chihuahua dog on the sofa.
What a ridiculous thing to say. You do talk nonsense. Get to the point. So you don't like Boris Johnson, right?
No, I do not.
Bye.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. We are well in now to the second hour of my show. Lots of messages and tweets coming in. One here from Paddy. This is interesting. See what you think of this. Dickie. Thanks a lot for that, Paddy. Dickie, you sound like a Home Counties officer from the Edwardian times, really. But I love your show and straight talking. If you want the good things in life and a civil equal society, you have to have some sort of high taxpayers somewhere, with those earning the big bucks. Well, look, the reality is about the top 1% of earners pay about 30% of all income tax. My point is that you've got to cut taxes for the least well off, the lowest paid. Let's all remember that income tax used to be, when it was first introduced 300 years ago as a temporary tax to pay for a war, it was a tax on the rich. But anyway, thanks for that, Paddy. Talking of straight talking, we need to focus on another issue that has raised its head again and again. 3 weeks ago, we had the report, the review into what had gone on with child sex exploitation in Oldham years and years ago, but over a very long period. And following that review, this week, there were some extraordinary scenes on Wednesday in the council chamber of Oldham, where the opposition councillors had put together a motion which sounded very sensible, that actually, given the gravity of what had happened, the concerns raised in this review, there should be a proper, full, open, transparent public inquiry into the events in and around Oldham, which of course is just one of so many towns in the north of England that have been suffering this child's exploitation. But the Labour councillors, en masse, voted down the idea of a public inquiry. The Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, was in the room. He, of course, is Labour. And the big question is, why? Why would they be against transparency and a public inquiry to try and dig into what's gone on, given there were some concerns about whether or not actually the review had had full access to all the required information? Well, there's no better person to talk to on this than Maggie Oliver, who used to be a detective. She's founder and chair of the Maggie Oliver Foundation, and who has done so much for so many victims of child sex exploitation. Maggie, a very good morning to you. Thanks for being with me on Tice Talk. I was astonished by the scenes in the council chamber, and it may be there are good reasons why the Labour councillors voted down the idea of a public inquiry. But you're so much closer to this than any of us. I thought it'd be great to get your take on it, where we are and where we go from here.
Hi, Richard. Nice to be here. What I'd say, first of all, is that when I was a detective in GMP, Greater Manchester Police, I never actually worked in Oldham. But the main victim stroke survivor who contributed to the Oldham review, I have been supporting for 3 years. So I know a little bit about Oldham. And I know that there is a lot of anger within that community about the fact that they feel they have been silenced. I think it will be interesting for your listeners to know that Sophie, as she's referred to in the review, but her real name is Samantha, and she wants to be referred to as Samantha. I've been supporting Sam for about 3 years, and it became clear towards the end of last year that the report was due to be published and she hadn't been approached. So she came to me and asked why. I went directly to the review team, and the truth is that they had been told by Oldham Council that they had approached Samantha and that she had said she did not wish to be involved in that review. Furthermore, Oldham Council said that she was at risk of committing serious self-harm or even suicide if they pursued their intention to interview her. I made them aware that that was not the truth, and subsequently I supported Sam as she gave her story to the review team. Now, I hadn't seen the review until it was published, the day it was published. I'd seen Sam's chapter, but I'd had no involvement in that review. But my concerns are that without my involvement and without Sam's relationship with me, her voice would not have been part of that review either. I wonder how many other victims and survivors wanted to contribute and were blocked from doing so. So I understand the anger of the council, but my journey to here, Richard, has led me to know that you cannot trust public bodies. An independent review, this was meant to be an independent review. The ICSA review was a national independent review. On every one of those inquiries, I feel the terms of reference are not correct. They don't go wide enough. The power and the control is given to a body that I actually don't trust anyway. So I believe that the way forward is more about gathering the stories of those victims and survivors in a truly independent way, which might be through the foundation or somebody within that community that can be trusted. The council cannot be trusted, in my opinion. These organisations, like ICSA, in my opinion, based on my experience, their job is to protect the establishment, to actually cover up the truth, not to expose what has really gone on. And the terms of reference in the Oldham review were far, far too narrow. It didn't go wide enough. Sam's story shows clearly that this had gone on a long time ago. But I will tell you, Richard, from my work with the foundation, that this is going on today. And I don't want them to be allowed to say this is a problem past.
And this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, the review did say they hadn't found any evidence of cover-up, but they found evidence of essentially incompetence, failure to address the issues, and also that there was a they weren't satisfied that they were getting the full information, which I guess comes back to your terms of reference. But so your lack of confidence, Maggie, in the establishment being able, essentially telling the truth, putting all the information forward, does that really mean that actually you sort of don't really see a benefit of a full public inquiry, and that's why you're essentially going down the route of promoting, in a sense, sort of stories from the individuals, the victims who've been abused themselves?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, Richard. I mean, I would draw a parallel with the Hillsborough inquiry, for instance. When that inquiry, that public inquiry was put together, all those victims had joined together and were an army of truth and voices. And it was virtually impossible for the establishment to say they didn't exist. If you have an army of victims from Oldham that are saying, we have been failed, we have not been heard, and you take a class action or an army of 20 or 30 or 40 victims, you gather them together, you gather their evidence. It is really, really difficult for the establishment to then push it away. If you give that control to the establishment, you might wait 3, 4 or 5 years for another report that would find that there hadn't been a cover-up. I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. So don't give them more power to tell you that nothing wrong.
Because here's the point. I mean, you've just said it earlier that sadly this is still going on in presumably numerous towns in Greater Manchester and indeed in the north. And so you've got that lack of trust, even though, of course, we hear all these warm words that, this is historic and it's all been sorted and we've now got a new Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police. Why haven't you got that confidence that new people coming in will sort this out?
Because, I don't... I always hope for the best and expect the worst. And that is based on my personal experience. I was threatened with prison if I spoke out. So I don't trust any of them. What they want to do really is silence people and pretend this doesn't exist. I would draw your attention to the Foundation have referred 33 very, very serious cases to Greater Manchester Police in the past 6 months. Of those 33 cases, which is victims who have come and said they are not being treated properly, their cases are not being progressed, only 2 have been resolved, well, not even resolved, but have been progressed. Last week, I went to a meeting with the Chief Constable. I took Sam, and then I had an hour with him. That was nearly 2 weeks ago. I was told in that meeting that a press release would go out where victims from Oldham would be encouraged to speak to the Foundation if they didn't want to go directly to the police. That public statement has still not been published. Victims do not know where to go. I know that they are floundering around in the darkness, but I would say come to us and we will be an umbrella over this. We're not investigators, but we can make sure that there is somewhere that truly can be trusted to gather the truth and not have any reason at all to cover up what is going on. And that is my mission in this, because I do feel that giving this power to people who have a vested interest in not allowing the truth to come out are exactly the wrong people who should be, handling an inquiry like this. So I know that there are different opinions in the Oldham community, but from my journey over the past 10 years, I'm afraid I don't trust any of them.
Well, it sounded like from the scenes in the council chamber when they voted on it that actually there's very little trust from many of the residents in Oldham into the people still in charge, still responsible for safeguarding.
I think that's true, but they are looking for somebody to trust, and they believe a public inquiry would be that place. I look at the National Abuse Inquiry, and there was a paltry 2 weeks given to looking at what is a national problem of grooming gangs, organised networks. Every single witness that was allowed to speak in that inquiry over a 2-week period was a representative of the police, of social services, people like me, like the Centre for Women's Justice, like Parents Against Child Exploitation. We were all blocked from giving evidence. So the report that comes out at the end of it has already been controlled. That they're not there to listen to the truth. They're there They start off with a hypothesis or an opinion that they want the report to prove. And every quote or every press conference that you hear a chief constable speaking, Richard, talks about failures of the past. These are failures of the past. They are hiding behind that. And that's why the terms of reference stopped a long time ago. Yeah. They are going today. And that's where my focus is. Get truth, get change, get accountability, and then we have a chance in stopping this.
Well, Maggie, you're a star. And actually, I've just had a message come in from James who says our councils and police forces should be doing their jobs. It shouldn't be down to just Maggie. Maggie, thank you so much indeed for that update. There's Maggie Oliver there from the Maggie Oliver Foundation, setting out not only is this still going on, but she doesn't have confidence in the institutions. She doesn't have confidence in the terms of reference. Truly, truly shocking, still ongoing, still battling. We have to give her every support. Thank you, Maggie, for that. Stay with us. We're going to be taking your calls, your messages and your tweets. It's Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk here this Sunday morning. That was an extraordinary interview with the amazing Maggie Oliver. Lots of messages coming in on that. One saying it's pretty obvious why Labour voted down a public inquiry. Voter numbers. Labour has a very high percentage of people who may be involved in the north of England, some of whom are the perpetrators. It's not rocket science. Good to hear another one here from Great Uncle Bob saying it's good to hear that it's being discussed. Seems that Andy Burnham was there in the meeting. He was indeed. So who was neglecting their duty? Absolutely disgusting, says Bob. Well, look, it's a fair point. You know, Andy Burnham has been mayor now for, I think, some 4 or 5 years. He's been re-elected. What's he doing? He's the ultimate boss. This is happening in his area, on his watch, and it is appalling. It's utterly shocking. And he needs to be held to account, and he needs to be on the front foot sorting it out. Those are some of the thoughts coming forwards. We're going to head to Cambridge, where Jackie's been patiently waiting. Morning, Jackie.
Morning.
Hi, what's on your mind?
Very powerful interview with Maggie, I have to say. Just 2 things, really. I don't want Rishi Sunak to be the next Prime Minister. The government that we're in have dealt with absolutely nothing, and the previous caller is just one example. I live in Cambridge. We have so many houses being built around here. They've flattened the countryside. We've got no trees, no hedges left. It is a disgrace. And all those houses are being bought from people abroad, and they're sitting empty. And we've got no housing in this country. They're not building the right sort of houses, and nobody else is dealing with any of these other problems apart from talking about tax. It is a total disgrace what's going on. Everything has been pushed by the wayside. And I feel sorry. I have a friend who was trying to buy a house for her daughter around here. There was no chance. They were all being bought. The details are being sent to China, and they were all being bought by people abroad and sitting empty. It is awful.
And it's still sitting empty, so they're not even being rented out?
No, they're not even being rented out. There's a lot of houses that've got cars parked in the drive, so it looks as if somebody's living in it. The gardens are up to the windowsill, and you can see they're empty. And, the place has got so scruffy. I mean, it's just disgraceful. I mean, the amount of building they've done, they've built hundreds of houses.
They certainly have. I'm well aware of that because, of course, Cambridge is a high growth area. There's been huge amounts of jobs, so there has been a real demand for the housing.
I understand that.
But you're saying lots of it is not being occupied,
no,
which surprises me.
Absolutely not. And that is the sadness. And as I say, as you're rightly saying, people are moving out from London, coming to this area for work, but the majority of the houses are sitting empty. Some of them are being used for those reasons, and some of them aren't.
Wow, that is pretty shocking. So you don't want Rishi Sunak. Who do you want, Jackie? Who's at the top of your ladder?
It is so difficult because they never really talked about anything about tax. They didn't talk about much else, and that is the sadness. I don't really know. I can't choose.
Well, will you be watching tonight on ITV tonight at 7 o'clock?
I watched some of the last one, but I had to turn it off because none of them came up with anything different. And as for Rishi Sunak, he did some good things, but the majority of things were underhand and disgraceful. No. And he's so removed from the general public.
Oh, yeah. Well, as it turns out he was at some building site in his loafers. Did you see how much they cost, Jackie?
Yes, I know how much they cost, hundreds.
500 quid. Has anybody listening or watching, got any shoes of any type whatsoever that cost 500 quid?
That just says it all.
Says it all, doesn't it, Jackie? Yeah. Thank you so much indeed. That's Jackie from Cambridge.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And there we are. I want to hear from anybody who's got any shoes, boots, anything, sandals, anything that's cost 500 quid a pair. Really? Are you in touch, Mr. Sunak? I want to hear from you. We're going to head... we've got more messages coming in supporting Maggie Oliver, who's an amazing lady, very courageous, all power to her, says Maisie Cat Crazy. What a great name. Fantastic. There we are. And one here said Andy Burnham was involved in something else in South Staff's Hospital. I don't know about that. But anyway, we're going to head from... we're going to stay in the same area, Suffolk, where Pat is. Hi, Pat. Have we got Pat in Suffolk?
Yeah, how do I say this without swearing?
Oh, don't swear. It's a family show, Pat.
Yeah, I know. This Oldham thing,
yes,
throughout the sort of northeast there, this really does beggar the goat. As I said, it's basically, this has been going on for many, many, many years now. I wonder if this had been middle-aged white men going around... have you cut me off?
No, no, not at all, Pat. I'm with you. I'm listening intently.
Sorry, when you're on sort of talking on thing. Anyway, I wonder if middle-aged white men went round praying and on young Asian girls, would this have ever happened? Well, it might have started, but stopped very quickly. Without saying the word, but it's technically racist. Nobody apart from obviously some of the men who've been prosecuted, but there should be prosecutions within the authorities. Now, we've put the Met Police into special measures because of certain things. Why haven't the police in these areas been put in special measures?
Well, actually, Pat, look, you're absolutely right. There's no question that the grooming gangs, which was mainly Pakistani men, the reports have clearly shown that basically all of the agencies, the multiple agencies involved, they knew what was going on, but they were worried about seeming to be racist, and therefore they made that judgment, which is so appalling, that in a sense it was better to let these hideous acts carry on than to call it out because it was Pakistani grooming gangs. That's the reality of what actually happened.
It's racist in no other word, because what you've done is prioritised one race over another, which is racism, and of course, but that's what's happened.
And cowardice, Pat.
Yeah, cowardice. But I said, is Maggie Oliver, I mean, I saw her in a programme about 6-7 years ago, and so it's been going on openly. In other words, everyone's known about it. It obviously was under the carpet for many, many years, but it's obviously been open. Everyone's known about it. But we've had you know, the media banging on about Boris and his parties and everything else for the last 18 months or whatever it is, how long it's been going on for. But this gets nothing.
It gets nothing. You're so right, Pat, and it's not good enough. Well, we're going to keep talking about it. You can rest your... you can absolutely be certain. Thank you, Pat. You can be certain that Maggie will keep talking about it, and we'll keep in close touch with her. Lots of views coming here. Oh, this is a great comment. I love this. Maggie's a hero. This is from Sappa. Sappa says, Maggie's a hero. She should be elevated to the peerage to focus on child exploitation. Burnham is a disgrace. Kemi for PM. There we go. We'll keep taking your calls. I haven't quite got time. Rosemary, quickly, in Maidstone. Are you there?
Yes, I am,
You've got 60 seconds, Rosemary. Go for it.
Yes, I think Maggie's brilliant too. Am I being a bit naive? But this is not a very serious crime that's been going on. And why are the perpetrators who come from a different culture not rounded up and sent back from whence they came?
This is a very serious crime, isn't it? I mean, that's the reality.
And the young girls are being portrayed as the problem. They are not the problem.
No, they're absolutely not, Rosemary. You're not being naive. It's appalling. I'm afraid it was cowardice by the agencies.
Well, I think they should be sent back to whence they came if they're immigrants, and they'd families as well, and tough if they were born here.
But the reality is, of course, that's it. Very often, these people have been born here. But what's happened is the cowardly agencies and police, they haven't been prepared to deal with it.
No.
You know, that's the reality. Rosemary, thank you so much for that call there. And we will be, after the break, talking about the leadership campaign. We'll be looking at my Snakes and Ladders leadership board. Lots of views and messages coming in. But also now some messages coming in. Jane says, all my shoes cost that much. Jane, I think you're joking. Stay with us. I need to hear more about the shoes. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
What was my biggest career moment? After spending about 25 years in Fleet Street, there's loads of stories I could tell you. But actually, I think I did an overnight show for Talk Radio in the early days, the night of the Brexit referendum. And that was actually quite a milestone because, of course, we started off thinking that Remain had won. And at 2:30, 2:45, after Nigel Farage had already said he'd lost, it turned out he hadn't lost. And it turned out we were leaving the European Union. So that was quite a shocker.
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Divya Kohli. Temperatures could top 40 degrees in England over the coming days, and extra measures are being put in place across the UK as Britain braces itself for record-breaking hot weather. New Health Secretary Steve Barclay says more ambulance call handlers and extra capacity for the 111 helpline are planned for tomorrow and Tuesday. Speaking to Times Radio, meteorologist Jim Dale from British Weather Services explains what makes this heat wave different from previous ones.
we're not used to it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
People and infrastructure. And while they say, yeah, we've been abroad and we've been at 40 degrees or we've been at 35 degrees, those countries are much more used to it. Their infrastructure is far more equipped to deal with it.
Meanwhile, wildfires are continuing to rage across Europe, causing thousands of people to evacuate. In Portugal, one pilot died when his plane crashed near the Spanish border. Several other nations, including Spain, France and Greece, are also dealing with fires. Contenders in the running to become the next Prime Minister will go head-to-head again tonight. The 5 candidates will be taking part in another leadership debate. Writing in the Sunday Times, Kemi Badenoch is promising to do whatever it takes to deal with the small boats issue. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak has vowed to scrap hundreds of remaining EU laws and regulations, while Penny Mordaunt faces scrutiny on trans rights. The government has announced that all state schools in England will have at least one defibrillator by the end of the next academic year. Research shows that using a defibrillator within 3 to 5 minutes of a cardiac arrest increases the chance of survival by over 40%. And an official picture has been released to mark the Duchess of Cornwall's 75th birthday. Clarence Howe says Camilla will celebrate later today with a small family dinner. It's likely Charles will host the evening get-together and guests are likely to dine at Highgrove. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. We're halfway through the second hour, and it's fair to say the price of shoes, the value of shoes, has triggered a bit of interest because we have a message here, which is probably a fair point, who says, Richard, I'm no fan of Sunak, but to discount someone because his shoes are expensive is slightly ridiculous. You can be very incompetent in cheap shoes. That, of course, is completely true. I was just really raising the point. Is he in touch with the issues around the cost of living crisis? But another one here from, this is a text message. I have trainers that are worth over £500. An original 1984 pair of Nike Vandals. I don't know what they are. The same style that Carl Reese wore in Terminator. Never worn. Sometimes I smell them and they smell good. Goodness me, that is too much information. I'm sorry I read that out on radio and TV. I can't believe anybody smells their unworn trainers just for pleasure, but there we go. What we are doing, though, is we are in the middle of this leadership campaign to be the next Prime Minister, and that means that there's lots of TV debates. The next one is tonight. We had the one on Friday, and we want to understand how that has shifted people's thinking. Certainly on my Snakes and Ladders leadership board, Penny Mordaunt shot up last week, but there's been hardly any support for her coming through this morning. There's been a growing support for Kemi Badenoch, which is fascinating. And it'll be, really interesting to see what happens in the vote tomorrow. I'm delighted now to be joined by Ben Page, the Chief Executive of Ipsos Polling and a visiting professor at King's College. So there's no one better to understand how people are thinking, what are the latest polls showing. Ben, a very good morning. Thanks for being with me. So I've got my sort of leadership snakes and ladders. Okay. Kemi Badenoch has been shooting up the ladder. I think she's got a sort of turbocharge in her shoes, whether they're expensive or not. But compared to last week, I would say from the messages I'm getting that Penny Mordaunt is dropping down a bit. What are you seeing on the polling?
So I think we need to, of course, distinguish between the public as a whole, conservative voters and people who take part in conservative home, the news website polls, and of course the debate polls that have been done. The big picture, I think, it's that Rishi Sunak remains probably the favourite, I would say, because among the public as a whole, he has more recognition, of course, because of his role during the COVID crisis, and he has more people actually that say that he would make a good Prime Minister than the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer. Now, having said that, of course, the public aren't deciding this vote, and it was interesting to see how the public reacted to the first leadership debate, where Tom Tugendhat, who is certainly not likely to do well among Tory MPs or indeed among the party faithful, did pretty well with the public. But overall, as you say, Kemi Badenoch has come from nowhere in this campaign. A week ago, among the public, we had only 6 people in 100 who claimed to know a great deal about her. We also had 6 people in 100 who claimed to know a great deal about my former colleague, Stuart Lewis, who in these situations we always put into the poll, along with the other candidates, just to check how many people are doing something known as yay-saying, which is the tendency to prove that you agree with everything. So, but nevertheless, she's done well. She's done well in the debates, and I think Liz Truss, to be honest, at least in the public's eyes, has probably done least well in the last week.
Yeah, I'm certainly hearing nothing, no support from the messages I'm getting through here. It's a limited sample, I agree, but nevertheless, it just gives us sort of a sense. And my viewership would be, they would be right of centre generally, and tax-cutting folk. So, so you're seeing Kemi Badenoch, really going up the polls.
Well, I mean, from starting literally nowhere and without a campaign, I mean, I think it was, politics is a rough old business, but when you see how ready Rishi was to launch his campaign, the fact that his website had been set up sometime last year, despite professions of loyalty, etc., it's just a reminder. So she's gone from a standing start to considerable recognition among the Conservative, among the electorate, and of course, and with some considerable support among Conservative MPs. I think there's some real questions about how the right of the party, the ERG group in Parliament, decide who they're going to vote for, because I think it's not at all clear cut. These are incredibly hard to call.
Well, that's right, and then you've got sort of trickery amongst the MPs themselves.
Absolutely.
Do you or anybody actually privately, anonymously poll the Conservative MPs?
We do actually do polls of them twice a year, and we have done since the 1970s, but not on this. And to be honest, what they would say to a pollster would probably have to be taken as much with a larger pinch of salt as on any other sort of issue around the leadership, because there's so much gaming and plotting and all the rest of it. I think what I would say, though, is if Kemi Badenoch does make it through, that will be a really interesting competition with the electorate, the members of the Conservative Party. But similarly with Penny Mordaunt, I think again, if the challenge will be for both Penny Mordaunt and for Kemi Badenoch, if they end up being the person against Rishi Sunak, is really the sort of practicality of some of the things that they're talking about.
Is it possible? I suspect that it's unlikely that MPs who are currently pro Penny Mordaunt would swing to Kemi, but I guess it's possible that some of the MPs who are pro Liz Truss may reflect on Friday night's TV debate and actually possibly swing towards Kemi, and that will be the most significant thing to watch tomorrow.
Absolutely. And of course, there's how everybody views the next debate and, what they say, and does somebody improve, does somebody drop a clanger, etc. No, it's a fascinating contest, and we're almost certain to have either our first Asian Prime Minister or at least our third female Prime Minister. And from the Conservative Party, it's one sign that it's getting, it's adapted to modern Britain, as it always does.
Without question. I mean, it's truly remarkable, the breadth and depth, the diversity of the full list of candidates, down to the 8, both in terms of gender, but also in terms of ethnicity, and, the different sort of sections of the party. Whilst we've been on, I've just had a message of a tweet of support for Liz Truss, described as a safe pair of hands. Just finally, a little bit of chat about Boris's disillusion honours list. There hasn't been much chat about that, but suggestions that someone like Nadine Dorries and Nigel Adams might be put on it.
Sounds perfectly plausible. I'm sure there's some more thrills and spills from the Boris show to come, and I have no inside information as to what he's going to do. But I'm sure
that would trigger a by-election, which may not be such a smart thing to do.
This is true, but I think Boris is probably beyond worrying about such things.
He's beyond worrying. Ben, thank you so much for your thoughts there. That's Ben Page, the Chief Executive of the guru of polling, Ipsos polling, and visiting professor at King's College, Cambridge. Lots of messages coming in, lots of thoughts, a lot of support here for Kemi, but keep those tweets and messages. I'll be taking the calls after the break. Actually, a bit of humour about the shoes. One here, Paul Rishi from Miss Ellie says, even if he wore his cheapest pair of shoes to go and rough it, and this is what he gets, he can't win. You're probably right there. But nevertheless, I just want to know that he's in touch with the difficulties people are suffering, and I think he's been too reactive and not proactive enough. Anyway, we'll take your calls after the break. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We are heading towards the end of the second hour. We've had loads of messages, tweets and calls. And I touched on there with Ben Page just at the end the honours list that is expected from Boris Johnson. Suggestions that it could actually be really rather long, after he quite likes appointing his friends and donors to the House of Lords. And I'd be interested in your thoughts. Who would you like to see on his dissolution honours list, and how long should it be? Well, there's one message here from Brian who says it's got to be Nigel Farage for the honours list. I would 100% agree with that. If the list is only one person, in my view, that's the name that should be on it. But I could have a very large bet that it won't be on it. That is for sure. Now, we've got a message here from Jennifer who says MPs need to read the room and put Kemi in the final two candidates. Do not deny members the chance to vote for her. This is a really key point. Are the Tory MPs in touch with their own membership? Do they think they know better? That is the point. What Jennifer goes on to say, I'd like her to state how ineffective and draconian lockdowns have been and that they won't be used again. this is a good point. Kemi's lack of experience can only be a positive after the damage the experts have done over the last few years. Anyone but Rishi. There we are. That's the thoughts from Jenny. It's a very good point. It's also a point that actually Tom Tugendhat has played on. You know, it's a clean start. Someone with experience elsewhere, but not tainted with the decisions of Boris Johnson's cabinet. Let's go to Burton-on-Trent, where Tracy is there with her views. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Richard. Richard, it's really back to what Maggie Oliver was saying. I actually think police crime commissioners are a bit of a waste of space. So I had a go at mine, Ben Adams, about what he actually does for the 1.7 million his office cost us. And I got his annual report last week. And the thing that shocked me, now this is for Staffordshire, we had, in the last 12 months, 464 referrals to a service of 464 referrals for children affected by child sexual exploitation. 464.
Goodness.
Now, what bothered me about that was not only the number, but the little bit that came after, which said 90% of the children who engage fully with they've got a service for, helping them out, demonstrated, 90% of children who engage fully with the service demonstrated a decrease in overall risk-taking behaviour. Now, there is absolutely nothing in the report, to me, any child that has been sexually exploited, they are not at fault. They are not at fault. And people should be brought to justice. There is nothing anywhere in the report about the level of prosecution. There is nothing in the report about how much crime is detected. There is nothing about how much is solved. And just this one little point made me think, as we've had with Oldham, as we've had with Rochdale, as we've had with Telford, is this going on in my locale as well? Because 464 children have been sexually exploited.
I mean, I think
464.
This is the point where, and I've read it elsewhere, Tracy, where there's almost, as you say, almost a sort of a blame of the children themselves, when actually they are. They're the victims. They're the ones who've been abused. But what this is, of course, is this is a very convenient distraction technique to avoid focusing on actually the safeguarding services and the agencies and the police who should have been sorting it out immediately, urgently, rapidly.
Yeah. And to be honest, you kind of think, well, it doesn't happen round by me. But after reading this report, I'm thinking, well, actually, maybe it does. And we went out for a curry the other Sunday, and the bloke that owns where we go for a curry is a lovely bloke, absolutely lovely. And I said to him, is the Asian community worried about this child grooming gangs? He said, we're actually getting quite frightened.
Really?
That's what he actually said to me.
Yes.
I said, are you getting any kickback? And he said, we're actually getting very frightened.
Yeah,
that's what
Tracy,
he said to me.
I'm afraid, from discussions I've had with Maggie, I fear that it is far more widespread. I fear that there's more to come out. I fear this is still going on. And there needs to be more accountability. That one of the drawbacks with these reports, these reviews, the public inquiries, is they take way, way, way too long. They shouldn't take years. They should take months, and it should be addressed in a much more urgent way. Tracy, thank you so much for your thoughts and concerns there. That was Tracy from Burton-on-Trent. Lots of messages coming in. Another one here saying the only person that Johnson should enable is Maggie Oliver. That's from Dosh Diddle. We will head up to Borough, where John is on the line. Hi, John.
Hello, Richard.
How are you doing? What's on your mind this morning?
Well, it's about the shoes.
I've been told off by a number of people about the shoes. What's your view on the shoes?
The shoes are Who pays for the shoes? Does it come out of expenses? Are the taxpayer paying for them, or is he paying for them himself?
Let's work on the basis that he's paying for them himself. He can certainly afford to. That's for sure.
If he's paying for them himself, no problem. Money's going, there's VAT to pay on shoes, and the money goes back into the treasury. So the more money he spends of his own money goes, the more
actually, I think shoes counts as clothing, and I don't think there is VAT on clothing, but we can check that out. I'll ask Aaron in my team to check that out. But
I think on adult clothing there's VAT.
We'll check that out. That's a very good point, John. I should know. You never stop learning, and we will clarify that.
It's the same with people who've got lots of money. If they spend it, all well and good.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's good for the economy. No, you're absolutely right. I guess the real point is, does it in any way impact on his understanding of how hard people find it to pay the daily, the weekly bills?
I believe he knows people are struggling.
Okay, and who's your... Did you watch the debate on Friday, John?
Oh, no, I've seen clips of it.
You've seen clips. Will you be watching tonight, or are you fed up with it?
What time is it on?
7 o'clock, ITV. Not that I'm promoting them, but there we are.
I'll probably putting some money, some VAT and duty back into the treasury.
Oh, yeah, very sensible then, John. Well, look, if you had a vote, who would you vote for?
Well, I like Kemi. She just looks nice. She looks kind.
That's very good. I think that's interesting.
Because you can't believe what any of them say, so you might as well go and watch.
Well, there you are, John. And you were quite right. There is VAT on adults' clothes and shoes. So well done, John. Thank you for that. We're all in the...
Keep buying shoes.
Keep buying shoes. Perfect. Well, and you keep supporting the economy. Thank you, John, from Barra. And we're going to head from there to Derby, where we have Tim on the line. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Richard. Just a question. I wondered if you were of the same opinion as me that any sort of world leader has to have a certain amount of charisma and stature.
Yes, I mean, I think for sure. It's what I call the aeroplane test. As you walk down the steps, do you have stature and personality?
Yes, I understand who you're referring to, but the same would go for Richie Sunak. Your early television programmes used to show Richie walking down a brickyard, some brick cul-de-sac, and if you look at him, he has the demeanour of Norman Wisdom. In fact, he even wears the same trousers of Norman Wisdom. Does he have a permanent bereavement in the family? In other words, his trousers are always at half-mast. Either buy some decent trousers or a decent pair of shoes that meets them. You know what I mean?
Maybe that's his fashion style. So what are your thoughts?
It's his fashion style, but his demeanour is that of Norman Wisdom. Just look at him. Look at that video.
So he doesn't give you the confidence of being statesmanlike.
He has no charisma, no stature. I mean, could you imagine him and Joe Biden standing together? You know, okay, he's got a green card. That puts him in Joe Biden.
Well, anybody standing next to Joe Biden needs to keep their hand out so that Joe can lean on it and keep him upright.
Exactly.
But who? So if it's not Rishi, who would you vote for then, Tim?
I'm a bit disillusioned at the moment. As I said, I watched it on Friday, and I wasn't very impressed with any one of them, to be honest with you. I mean, I could be a Southwood and say, yes, Liz Truss is a safe pair of hands, and maybe that's what we want. Maybe her and Rishi Sunak, no, definitely not. Jenny Mordaunt.
Penny Mordaunt.
I was really backing. I was really going for her, and then sort of things have changed. This campaign they've got going against her, it really saddens me. It really does.
Well, is it a campaign, or is it actually proper scrutiny because she's a bit of an unknown, and there are some questions that she's got to properly answer, isn't it?
Well, yes, she's definitely got to answer them. And that is the point, and that's what I say. That's what put me off a little when she answered them on Friday. Whether that completely convinces me, I'm not really sure. We've only got 5 to choose from, and out of any one of them, I wouldn't, if I had the choice, elect any one of them, to be quite honest with you. I have no real faith in any one of them. But as a safe pair of hands, at least...
Were you sad to see Boris go?
Oh, very sad, very sad. I know he had his problems.
Do you think he had to go, or do you think he could have ridden them out?
He could have ridden them out if he'd had some more backing from other members of his party when Rishi Sunak went, and when the I'm Not a Quitter went, Javid Savage.
Yeah, well, the only thing Sajid really does do is quit. He's quit from 2 cabinets, and he quit from the leadership campaign before they went to the first vote. So I think he's not the chief whip, he's the chief quitter. But there we go. Tim, thank you very much for your thoughts there. That's Tim. He's not that impressed with any of them. But there's lots of messages coming in. One here from Nathan, who actually, this is good for Penny, would like to see Penny Mordaunt as PM. Helena says, morning, Richard, love the show. The Conservatives are not reading the room. Kemi is popular. Rishi Rich is not. I think this is definitely a growing trend, that lots of people would like to see Kemi in the last 2. Quite hard to see that that's really going to happen. That would require lots of votes to move from Liz Truss to Kemi Badenoch. We'll see. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 12.
Good afternoon, I'm Divya Kohli. Temperatures could top 40 degrees in England over the coming days, and extra measures are being put in place across the UK as Britain braces itself for record-breaking hot weather. New Health Secretary Steve Barclay says more ambulance call handlers and extra capacity for the 111 helpline are planned for tomorrow and Tuesday. Speaking to Times Radio, the chair of the NHS Confederation, Lord Victor Adebowale, shared his concerns.
The NHS will cope, but coping isn't good enough. We need to be actually operating in a way that allows people to get the treatment they need, where they need it, in good time. And that's a struggle, right?
Meanwhile, wildfires are continuing to rage across Europe, causing thousands of people to evacuate. In Portugal, one pilot died when his plane crashed near the Spanish border. Several other nations, including Spain, France and Greece, are also dealing with fires. Contenders in the running to become the next Prime Minister will go head-to-head again tonight. The 5 candidates will be taking part in another leadership debate. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak has vowed to scrap hundreds of remaining EU laws and regulations, while Penny Mordaunt faces scrutiny on trans rights. Writing in the Sunday Times, Kemi Badenoch is promising to do whatever it takes to deal with the small boats issue. But Conservative MP Suella Braverman has called for her to consider her position in the race and back Liz Truss.
On the numbers, it's Liz. And that's why I would urge my colleagues to really think about that. We need to get Liz into the final 2. If she's in the final 2, she'll be able to win amongst members. And I'm afraid no one else really can match that objective.
The Cabinet Minister who led the COP26 climate summit has indicated he'll resign if the next Prime Minister isn't fully committed to the net zero agenda. Alok Sharma is reportedly urging the candidates to proactively set out their support for it. A Ukrainian plane reportedly carrying dangerous material has crashed in northern Greece, killing the whole crew. It happened yesterday near the city of Kavala. The cargo flight was apparently carrying explosives. The government has announced that all state schools in England will have at least one defibrillator by the end of the next academic year. Research shows that using a defibrillator within 3 to 5 minutes of a cardiac arrest increases the chance of survival by over 40%. And an official photograph has been released to mark the Duchess of Cornwall's 75th birthday. Clarence House says Camilla will celebrate later today with a small family dinner. It's likely Prince Charles will host an evening get-together at Highgrove. Those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your TalkSport update. First, your weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
It will be a largely fine day across the UK with long spells of sunshine, although with some cloud lingering in the far northwest. Feeling hot across much of England and Wales. A dry day across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but with some chances of light patchy rain in the far northwest of Scotland. Feeling hot across parts of Northern England through the afternoon, where an amber extreme heat warning is in force throughout the day. Plenty of sunshine for Wales and central England through the afternoon, and feeling hot with temperatures climbing into the low 30s. A hot afternoon for much of southern England and the Channel Islands too. Winds will be light but breezy across Cornwall, especially along the coast. So staying dry and very warm across much of the UK, with unusually high temperatures lasting through the evening and into the night.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
We're all set for a thrilling final round of the Open Championship at St Andrews, with Rory McIlroy in a share of the lead. McIlroy will tee off with Norway's Victor Hovland in the final pairing. Both players tied on 16 under par and 4 clear of the chasing pack. McIlroy is gunning for a second Open title and 5th major. Britain's Dina Asher-Smith set the fastest time in the heats as she booked her place in the semi-finals of the 100 metres at the World Athletics Championships. Asher-Smith set the second best time of her career and is joined in the semi-finals by fellow Brit Daryl Nater. And former Wales Rugby Union captain Ryan Jones has been diagnosed with early onset dementia. The 41-year-old was capped 75 times for Wales, guiding them to the Grand Slam in 2008. He told the Sunday Times that he feels like like his world is falling apart after specialists told him it was one of the worst cases they had seen. That's all for now. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
Danny in Ipswich, you're on the air. Danny, good morning.
I'm sitting here with my little Chihuahua dog on the sofa.
What a ridiculous thing to say. You do talk nonsense. Get to the point. So you don't like Boris Johnson, right?
No, I do not.
Welcome back and good afternoon. Yes, unbelievably, we have flown into the third hour of my show. I don't know where time goes, but it's been busy. We've been talking about the leadership contest and all sorts. I've been getting a hard time from various people, including Christine, who has told me off for not knowing enough about the VAT rules. There are only 20,000 pages in the HMRC tax rules and regulations, but Chris says there is VAT on clothes, but yes, that's only adult clothing, not children's clothing. And Christine says, let us 64 million vote for the next PM. Well, I'll share a bit of information for you. It's not 64 million who can vote, because, of course, you only get a vote if you're over the age of 18, which means that it's well below 55 million, actually, who can vote. But that'll be for the next general election. Lots of other messages coming in. One here, I've concerns about Kemi after Friday night. Another here, one concern about Penny Mordaunt. Gareth says, until I learned of her involvement with Bill Gates and Lord Frostcommons, I thought she was the best candidate. Now, Gareth says it's got to be Kemi. Anyway, this, of course, is all because Boris Johnson he's resigned as Prime Minister, and one of the things that he was leading on, I think all of us actually gave him huge credit for, was the robust support that he gave on behalf of the UK and indeed on behalf of the West in drawing together a proper alliance of support for Ukraine. And with all the leadership stuff going on, the issue of the Ukrainian war sort of slips further and further back into our newspapers, but it still has it's just a hugely significant issue. And so I'm delighted to be joined now by Kira Rudik, who is the Ukrainian Member of Parliament and leader of the Voice political party. A very good afternoon to you, Kira. And obviously, significant political things happening in the UK with Boris Johnson leaving. And I guess that is a question mark and a possible concern, first up, for the Ukrainian leadership. In terms of what does that mean for the support from the UK? Is that something that worries you, or have you received sufficient reassurance about our ongoing support?
Hello, Richard. Thank you so much for having me. So, yes, we do believe that the support that we were getting from the United Kingdom is rather not Boris Johnson to President Zelensky, but United Kingdom to Ukraine. And we do have high hopes on that this support will continue in a couple of terms. Well, the first one is obviously the weapons. And we were reassured by multiple statements by many of UK officials, including Ben Wallace, who have been a great friend to us as well, that the military support will continue. The second point is the financial support. And together with UK MPs, I'm working on seizing Russian assets and getting them back to Ukraine, or getting them to cover some of you guys' costs of Ukrainians' help. I believe strongly that UK taxpayers should not be paying for Putin's crimes. And you have enough of Russian money seized to cover for many important projects, important directions. And the third is sanctions. And here again, the United Kingdom is standing at the forefront. You're basically leading the pack in this matter. And this, I also strongly believe, will not be turned back.
And I'm absolutely certain that whoever is elected leader will continue that strong support. And you raised the point about sanctions. Just want to touch, Kira, also on, and I really appreciate you being on to sort of talk about this, is we hear a lot in the West about military support being provided, financial support, but the question is whether that actually genuinely, that military support, the weapons, the ammunition, is it getting through to you fast enough, or actually are the sort of the headlines not translating into real equipment and finance on the ground?
Richard, I can honestly tell you that in between the headline and the day when Ukrainian soldiers will get their weapons that were promised, it's usually 2 to 3 months, which is absolutely unacceptable. But I also know that there is a lot of work being done to change this logistic and make it faster. But as hard as it is for me to accept and understand and realize, many countries were not ready to bring this logistics up. They were not ready. They will have to provide weapons as fast as we need them. But I can tell you that there are improvements. And you see the recent advances of Ukrainian army at the east and at the south, and the recent destructions of Russian infrastructure objects. It is all the result of that we finally started getting the weapons we need. Not the ones that countries have, not the ones that they're willing to provide, but the ones that we actually need to fight Russians back. And because right now we know that we will be getting more of these weapons, I have high hopes that there will be a turning point in this war, that we will start pushing them back.
That's good. So you're encouraged that actually the supply of the weaponry you need is improving. And that obviously is encouraging for your troops on the ground. Do you have any concerns? Obviously, we're in the middle of summer now, and it's less of an issue. But we're already seeing rationing of energy in Germany. Concerns that Putin may use the weapon of gas as some form of blackmail, essentially, to continental European nations such as Germany and Italy. And that this is going to add a significant additional risky dimension to the geopolitics around the war and the pressure that may bring to bear.
Richard, the fact that Russia will use weapons, will use energy as weapons, is not a concern. It is a fact. And we have been talking of it as a fact for, 3 years from now. So what the countries need to do is to get rid of their dependency on the Russian energy resources. And they need to do it not because of Ukraine, but because of their citizens and their interests. Because we know that Russia is, first, not a reliable partner, and second, will screw you whenever they can. And we already have seen that. We don't need additional proofs of that. And right now, the goal is just to make it as fast as possible. And as a politician, I know it's not possible as fast as we need it. And of course, I'm concerned that there could be some negotiations that can harm the case of my country. But I also know that if countries will come up into agreement with Russia, it will be much worse. It will be really bad for them at the first point, and then it will be bad for Ukraine.
Yes, I think that's right. There is, significant pressure, and the challenge for countries like Germany and Italy is, in a sense, they can't move fast enough before this winter. That's the real challenge for them, and we can't sort of build the liquid national, the LNG ships fast enough, or the gas terminals to be able to replace that, in a sense, in the matter of months. Just finally, Kira, just interested in your thoughts on, we've talked about supplies going to the Ukrainian military. What's the position with Russia's ability to keep its own forces supplied, and whether that's being hindered or impacted in any way?
Not really. We don't see that there are less supplies or less people that Russia is able to provide to the front. This is in both ways predictable, but also scary. We knew that we are fighting the second largest army in the world, but we didn't actually feel it. And right now, after 5 months, when we see that there is still uninterrupted flow of people and supplies, of rockets that are hitting our cities, of soldiers that are coming to kill us, it is actually very frustrating. But we also know that the sanctions, that all the pressure, it will have the result. It's with every good process that's taking time. Only bad things happen fast. The good things need time, and we know that. And this is what I'm telling our soldiers, to motivate them to stay stay still and fight hard, saying we need to win this time to allow all our allies to pressure Russia this way that they will fall down and will never be able to raise up.
Yeah. Kira, fascinating. Thank you so much. Just a message here, actually. The UK are a friend to Ukraine and our government spending billions. Will our own people be able to pay for it? And I get that's the sort of political message we're starting to hear. How long is winter away and how many people will die in the UK due to lack of heat and food? That was Kira Rudik, the Ukrainian MP, the leader of the Voice political party. Kira, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts with us. Stay with us. We're going to be taking your calls, your messages, your tweets. You know the number, 0344 499 1000. Lots of views coming in. One from Chris in Ottershaw who says, can't we have Kira Rudik for PM? She is not going to be on the ballot paper, but she is without question a very, very brave politician who's kept us well informed about what's going on. Another message here. I've concerns about Kemi after Friday night's debate. Can she be trusted? She stuck like glue to Rishi and Liz, but was very quick to strike out and undermine Penny and Tom. Interesting. Is she just trying to secure her seat in the cabinet? Interesting thoughts there. OK, we're going to the break. Stay with us. We'll take your calls. You know where we are. You know the number. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends. Good afternoon. You're listening to Tice Talk here at Talk TV. Loads of messages coming in. My Snakes and Ladders leaderboard, it's all over the place at the moment. I'm a bit concerned that some of the ladders may be moving sort of horizontally and the snakes are disappearing, because actually there's a lot of support for everybody. A little bit of support for Tom Tugendhat. One here, a bit of concern about Kemi. Let's see if I can find that. Yes, here we are. No, where is it gone? Concern that Kemi hadn't got enough experience. So that's that. And one here from Theo, who says, I'll not vote for the Tories if Rishi is leader. Yes, if Kemi or Tom. No for Penny. Possible if Liz. That's what I call sitting on the fence. That's what most of them are doing. Anyway, there's another interesting one here from Chile who says, Morrison's are starting to ration some foods already. How long before we're rationing energy here in the UK? I'm going to be talking about this in the weeks ahead because I'm genuinely concerned that the sort of energy rationing that is starting to be seen now in summer in Germany because of their dependency on Russian gas, whilst we're not so dependent on Russian gas, we've got our own self-inflicted problems, a lack of capacity. We're right on the edge, and therefore I think there will be every prospect of businesses being paid to go to a 2 or 3 or 4 day week in order to reduce energy demand if something goes wrong. But we're going to head up to Durham, where Charles is there, has been waiting very patiently. Good afternoon, Charles. What's on your mind?
Hi, Richard. Thanks for taking my call. Just a couple of comments and questions, really, about the leadership race and particularly Rishi's bid. You know, in a perfect world, everything that Rishi is saying at the moment makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if we were living in a time when the economy was under control, it was growing, inflation was under control, everybody had jobs and inflation was down, etc. Everything he says makes sense. But the problem is we are not living in a perfect world. And most of the people in this country are suffering kind of right now. We're behind the 8 ball right now. So I guess my question is, if Rishi is making sense, then how long does he think it would take for him to get the economy under control and growing? And how long before inflation gets nailed down?
Charles, you're so right. I mean, that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying he's got to get inflation under control, but this is the guy that actually basically missed the impact of his huge, over-generous, overlong furlough scheme and hugely generous spending on things like test and trace for too long. So he's partly responsible for the inflation, but a lot of this inflation is cost push. It's energy inflation, Charles, and therefore he's no idea how long that's going to take. No idea at all.
So does he expect us to sort of sit and twiddle our thumbs until he actually gets it all under control? I mean, how long is that going to take?
I'm afraid I think that's exactly what he expects. And meanwhile, it's the lowest paid, the least well off, the poorest, the most vulnerable in society who suffer the most because energy costs are such a greater percentage of their weekly net income.
Well, that's it. I mean, when you've got £800 million in the bank, you can easily ride out this kind of storm. And if you've got a job that pays $100K a year, you can ride out the storm. But for most people, that's impossible. So...
and this is my concern. I keep saying the challenge is now, that's why I described it a few weeks ago, as an emergency recovery budget. Whereas he just seems to be sort of sitting, watching and waiting and saying, well, if I get inflation sorted, then it might be good enough to give you a bit of a tax cut just before an election.
Yeah, and the thing is, if I got an extra 200 or 300 quid a month in my bank account, you know, I'm not going to go out and spend it on a 65-inch TV or a Volvo or a holiday in Marbella. It's just going to pay the bills, which have already increased so much. So how does that contribute to inflation?
Well, that's right. I mean, the reality is that much of this inflation is what we call cost-push inflation. It's outside the control of monetary supply and won't be affected by raising interests. So, you know, what we've got to do is we've got to cut the cost of goods, and the way to do that is, of course, to cut consumer taxes.
Yep, absolutely agree.
Charles, thank you so much. That was Charles in Durham with his thoughts. And we've got some other interesting here. Message come in from Racina, who says Tom Tugendhat is too liberal. Definitely no to Rishi. But we haven't actually got an answer or a suggestion alternatively. So there we are. Another one concerned here. Why is Tom Tugendhat such a hero? He's joint French and British nationality. I'm not sure about that. His wife's a French judge, so what? Actually, Tom Tugendhat wasn't a Brexiteer. So there we are. He voted Remain, I am certain. There we go. Meanwhile, we have west in Ireland. We've got Shane. Hello, Shane. How are you?
Hello. Good morning, Richard.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon now, yeah. Well, it was morning when I started phoning in.
Oh, anyway, I'm sorry about that. Well, it's been pretty busy. What's on your mind then, Shane?
Rishi cannot be trusted. Rishi cannot be trusted. He was there today. I'm supporting the Prime Minister. I'm supporting him. Then he led the coup and the whole lot. And I think Tom is the man to get in because of his military training. The world is a dangerous place at the moment. And so Rishi, and I think the first 10 big guns that walked out on Boris, I think they should be all give backbench jobs. They're not to be trusted. We need a team, a government that will stand behind their leader. We need a nation that will stand behind the leader, and not this hammering away with some statement he made 25 years ago, and the media will bring it up and just tear him down again, because whoever gets the job is going to be under such scrutiny. And we need a person that's not afraid to offend people by making hard decisions.
That's right. And so you got confidence from Tom, from the leadership he showed in the army when he was serving.
Yes, yeah.
He gives you confidence. Well, that's good. But do you think he's up to it in terms of the economics?
Yeah, absolutely, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out this thing. You're all depending on Rishi's financial brain, right?
Yeah, well, that's led us to being the highest taxed for 70 years, which isn't great.
This is what I'm saying. Like, look, in my opinion, we had the best Prime Minister since Winston Churchill in Boris. This is my opinion now. And okay, Boris had a few drinks and whatever.
And the problem was, Shane, you couldn't trust what the truth as to what came out of his mouth.
I do. I have to give that.
There you are. Listen,
there, but
Shane, I've got your thoughts about Tom. That's fascinating. He's heading up the leaderboard today. There's no doubt about it. Thank you, Shane in Ireland. He would prefer Boris was still there, but otherwise he's going to support Tom to face the challenges. Swindon is where David is waiting. Hi, David. Just over a minute.
Hello there,
How are you doing? What's on your mind?
Earlier on, I have to go for a drive. Basically, I want to talk about COP26 and what I'd ask them about net zero, the candidates.
Go for it. What would you ask them?
I got this theory that I'd like to spend £13 million on heat pumps.
13 million, is that all?
13, that's all. But I want everybody to put 50p in. Because what I'd say is, the candidates, if you're so convinced on net zero, we're going to pay for you free to have a heat pump installed in your house. So that's 650 MPs, 20,000 is 13 million.
Okay.
See what they say. They say, oh, no, thank you. Well, let them see how they got on with a heat pump.
That's a really interesting idea, actually. So basically make them the guinea pigs, is what you're saying, David. And if they get a bit chilly over the winter, then we can realise it's a flawed plan of theirs.
Yeah, and perhaps they'd have a little bit of insulation as well.
And maybe whilst we're at it...
Go on.
David, you're absolutely right. Maybe whilst we're at it, we could ask Alex Sharma to buy an electric car, because he's so keen on COP26.
No, I've got a list of things. Listen. I've got a list of things here I wanted to talk to you about. And the first one was that 13 million. I'm being a bit...
We've only got 30 seconds. You better make it quick,
okay,
David.
Yeah. I would also make all ministerial cars electric, and all second homes would have to have the insulation as well. Also, why aren't new builds? New builds, you don't have to have an electric heat pump installed. Actually,
you do. To be honest, David, you do. They can't use gas.
Builds?
Yeah, on new builds in the UK, and I think they now need to have electric chargers. But send us a list, tweet us a list in, we'll keep going through it. David, thank you very much. That's David in Swindon. He quite rightly says, why not make guinea pigs of the MPs who want heat pumps? Well, let them put heat pumps in their own homes. See how they feel when they've got cold water and they've got to replace all the radiators and the disruption and the grief. It's Tice Talk here at Talk TV.
What was my biggest career moment? After spending about 25 years at Fleet Street, there's loads of stories I could tell you. But actually, I think I did an overnight show for Talk Radio in the early days, the night of the Brexit referendum. And that was actually quite a milestone because, of course, we started off thinking that Remain had won. And at 2:30, 3:15, after Nigel Farage had already said he'd lost, it turned out he hadn't lost. And it turned out we were leaving the European Union. So that was quite shocking.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Divya Kohli. Temperatures could top 40 degrees in England over the coming days, and extra measures are being put in place across the UK as Britain braces itself for record-breaking hot weather. New Health Secretary Steve Barclay says more ambulance call handlers and extra capacity for the 111 helpline are planned for tomorrow and Tuesday. Speaking to Times Radio, the chair of the NHS Confederation, Lord Victor Adebowale, shared his concerns.
The NHS will cope, but coping isn't good enough. We need to be actually operating in a way that allows people to get the treatment they need, where they need it, in good time. And that's a struggle right now.
Meanwhile, wildfires are continuing to rage across Europe, causing thousands of people to evacuate. Italy is among the countries experiencing extreme drought conditions, with rivers and reservoirs drying up. Contenders in the running to become the next Prime Minister will go head-to-head again tonight. The 5 candidates will be taking part in another leadership debate. Writing in the Sunday Times, Kemi Badenoch is promising to do whatever it takes to deal with the small boats issue. But Conservative MP Suella Braverman has called for her to consider her position in the race and back Liz Truss.
On the numbers, it's Liz. And that's why I would urge my colleagues to really think about that. We need to get Liz into the final 2. If she's in the final 2, she'll be able to win amongst members. And I'm afraid no one else really can match that objective.
And Marks & Spencer will be removing best before dates from more than 300 fruit and vegetable products as part of the retailer's efforts to reduce food waste. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're in the last half hour of the show before the amazing Trisha Goddard at 1 till 4. She will have a great show as always. And then, yes, of course, at 4 o'clock, he's back. Kevin O'Sullivan, fresh from last night with Mike Graham. Great show they had then. He is on from 4 till 7. And then, of course, it is the unbelievable, the extraordinary Mark Saggers taking us through until 10. Lots of messages still coming in. Tweets and thoughts about the leadership debate. One just saying there we need to double the heat pump budget for the MPs because they've all got 2 homes. Who knows? But there we go. It is hot out there, and it's going to get even hotter over the next couple of days. And who better to tell us what's going on and why than a weather forecast, weather guru, weather presenter, and the meteorologist, who is also, I discovered, John, is it true you're a huge Status Quo fan?
Massive, Richard. Massive. I've been all my life.
John Hammond, meteorologist, welcome to Tice Talk. Thank you for being with me. So, it is hot and getting hotter, John. How concerned should we be? But equally, some of us don't like living in a nanny state where we're sort of told exactly what we can and can't do.
Yeah, I know. I mean, how hot is it going to be? It is going to be the hottest this country has ever seen in recorded history. There's no doubt about that now. I mean, that might sound like I'm sticking my neck out because we're talking about the next couple of days, and normally forecasters sort of caveat their forecasts quite a lot, don't they? But the computer models have been bang on consistent all the way through the run-up to this event. They really haven't changed. And so, you know, within a degree or two, we can argue about whether the highest temperature will be 39, 40 or 41. What's in a degree when it's going to be that hot? And it will break the all-time record. It's not just that hot now, Richard. At the moment, outside, it's high 20s for most, just nudging towards 30 degrees, for example, in the London area. But that's not exceptional. That's just a very hot summer's day, isn't it? And there's a bit of a breeze, and actually people are out and about enjoying it. And it's not sunny everywhere. For parts of northern England, Scotland, if you've been watching the Gulf, it's cloudy and it's cool here. But actually it's really through Monday and Tuesday when that heat ramps up.
And
two real factors.
What was the peak temperature, John, in the UK?
Up to before this, 38.7. That was set 3 years ago in Cambridge.
Right.
That's the one to beat. And yeah,
you've absolutely put you've put your neck on the line, and you said it's a dead cert.
I have. I think it. Well, a weatherman never says it's a dead cert, but I'm 95. I'm 95% sure.
We've got this for a couple of days. I'm old enough, and I did actually check. I think you are too. We remember the 1976, John, when
we do.
Actually we had 16 consecutive days of over 30 degrees.
Yeah,
and I think there were 5 days over 35.
Yes.
How we now? I mean, I can't. This is quite scary, actually. That is 46 years ago. How are you thinking about this compared to then? At a time then, believe it or not, they were worried about global cooling as opposed to global warming.
Yeah, you're right. All of that's true. I remember it well. I remember I grew up on the south coast, and I remember bathing in Chichester Harbour, and it felt like bath water. It was that warm at the end of the summer. Yes, it was a longer hot spell, Richard, and that's what made it, so noteworthy. That's why we're still talking about it, because it went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. This particular hot spell won't last that long. It's a 2-day wonder. But the honest facts of the matter are that heat spells are happening more often, and they're happening more severely as well. So, as I mentioned, the previous record was only set 3 years ago, and I'm pretty confident we're going to smash it again over the next couple of days. So, yes, 76 will always stand out in the memory of people of a certain age, but that was a freak event. That's why it's so noteworthy, because it was so rare in those days to have such a hot spell. They're happening more often, Richard, and they're happening more severely.
Would you, with this experience you've got and your certainty as a forecaster, do you think this we may see another very hot spell this summer, or do you think this is going to be a short, sharp peak?
That's a really good question. Certainly the indications are that from midweek onwards, it will turn much fresher, much cooler. So, as mentioned, this will be a 2-day wonder, and then it will cool off midweek. And for a few days, it will be, thank goodness, a lot fresher. Kind of business as usual. We'll be in the 20s rather than the 30s. There'll be some showers around as well, which will be welcome news for gardeners. But the heat just gets shunted away, Richard. It doesn't disappear completely. It's going to be looming large further south and east across Europe. And some computer models do indicate that it might have another bite at us. I must say at this stage that's a minority of computer output, but it's one to keep an eye on. So although the consensus is that as we end the month and go into the early days of August, it'll be more normal, it'll be cooler, it'll be a mixture of sunshine and showers, but we've got to keep an eye on that minority output from some computer models, which indicate that heat will come back at us and bite once more. So that is one to keep an eye on.
One to keep an eye on. And do you then draw any sort of 6-month conclusions about what this may mean for this sort of forthcoming winter? Does a warmer summer, does that flow that you get a warmer winter or not?
Not really. One of the main factors in determining what sort of winter we're going to get will be La Nina. It's the cooling of the Pacific. It's been a very persistent La Nina over the last year or two. Normally, it would have faded away by now. It's actually re-intensifying. So as we go into the autumn, the central and eastern Pacific will be unusually cold still. Now, that has knock-on effects on the jet stream, very complicated knock-on effects. There are other factors as well. But that may be one of the big drivers as we head towards winter. We haven't had a cold winter for an awfully long time. Maybe it's this one, but it's not directly related to the fact that we're having
you sound a lot less certain there, John, than you were that this week is going to be a record breaker. You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. It is an absolute dead cert guarantee. John Hammond has literally put everything on breaking the record. We might get him back on next week if he's failed. John, thank you so much for sharing that with us. We're going to quickly take a call from Gary in Essex before we go to the break. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for taking my call.
What's on your mind? We've got a couple of minutes.
Right. I wrote to my MP in Essex, I'm not allowed to say his name apparently, complaining about the net zero agenda and this ridiculous thing about electric cars coming in by 2030. I told him how ridiculous it was. He wrote back to me telling me how wonderful the world was and he attached an article about electric cars in Norway. He didn't know I'd actually travelled to Norway on business, and I corrected him on that. Anyway, so we had some dialogue, and he said, "Oh, it's a wonderful thing. It'd be better for the environment." Anyway, cut long story short, when I'm retired, we used to work in the city. Got on the train, had lunch with a friend of mine, and he said, I went to an investment talk the other day by your MP, and he was extolling the virtues of green investment trusts and investment in renewables.
Right.
I was completely shocked. I mean, how can he represent me when he's literally, selling these trusts, for renewables and green energy? I don't understand it. Who does he represent? His business, or does he represent?
Well, I guess it depends. It depends, Gary, if he's a non-exec director of one of these investment trusts or investment unit trusts or something. Maybe that's what he is.
Yeah, I mean, I was furious, to be quite honest. I just don't get it. I don't see how. And I saw this MP on the TV.
And do you know actually?
Honesty,
do you know, Gary, if he's got his own? Yeah, do you know if he's got his own electric car?
I don't know. I doubt it very much.
There you are. I mean, the reality is, I like less noise. That's one of the main reasons I've got an electric car. But the hypocrisy of all these leaders promoting net zero when they haven't even, led from the front themselves, I just think is extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly. What is the point of me writing to my MP, trying to get a sensible answer, when he's basically selling these things? It cannot be right.
Well,
this cannot be right.
Keep challenging him, Gary. Keep challenging him. That is what I would advise to you. Thanks for calling. That was Gary in Essex. His concern about his MP and why he's promoting something that he doesn't actually back himself. There we go. Keep the calls coming in. Keep the messages, the tweets. We will take those after the break. Before it's Trisha at 1 o'clock. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, everyone, to Tice Talk. I can't believe it. Just 15 minutes left, and we've got calls, we've got loads of tweets. One here from Frank in Bromley. I don't know if this is right or not, but back in 1976, he goes, Richard, we hadn't implemented the Clean Air Act, so there was still sulphur dioxide, more of that in the atmosphere, causing haze that reflected sunlight and kept the temperature down. Interesting thought. I wonder if anybody else has got any other views. Then another one here, a text message. Richard, your correspondent says it's a La Nina, but actually it's natural cycles, not carbon dioxide in all likelihood. Well, lots of views. I have to say, on the Snakes and Ladders leadership contest, not much support for Rishi Sunak. A lot of support for Kemi Badenoch there. Penny Mordaunt, I would say, has been slightly sliding down the snake on the leadership board this week. But definitely Tom Tugendhat has risen up the ladder without question. But I think this time next week, I think he will be gone. Who else will be gone with him? We're going to head to London, where David's on the line. Hi, David.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Richard, by the way, the previous caller, I think, sums it up a lot, you know, what's going on, the MP making money from yeah. But I want to say, Richard, that the candidates talk about improving the economy, but none of them are talking about or seem to be aware of the problems on London's roads. You can't have a good economy, if you haven't got good roads. I mean, they should spend some time around Victoria Station and Park Lane. It's becoming a joke.
Oh, tonight, but David, they don't want you on the roads. They want you. They want you cycling, or they want you working from home. Some of these people.
Of course they do, but they should try and convince tradespeople. They're stuck in traffic, and the amount of lost productivity that I witness when I'm working is staggering, and I'm staggered.
And what's your trade, David?
Cabbieing. Yeah.
Right, you're a cabbie, yeah. So you see it every day. Well, I live in London. I mean, you're so right. It's an absolute nightmare, and the lost productivity is just shocking. And in so many areas now, driving at 20 miles an hour, I mean, it must drive you mad.
Well, that's bad, but it's the being stuck in traffic. Sadiq Khan, this government at Park Lane, I could go on and on. Do they want an economy? Do they really think plumbers, electricians, etc., people driving lorries, they can do that on a bicycle?
No, it's utter madness. I mean, of course there's a balance. And of course, there's lots of good things about having more people getting exercise, cycling and things. But I'm with you, David. They've overdone it. I mean,
they've overdone it. And also, Richard, general people like nurses and doctors, when they work in central London, but they live many miles away, do they really expect them to cycle to work?
No, they don't. They expect them to come in on public transport, which sometimes is there, but sometimes they're on strike. David, thank you so much indeed, and thank you for what you do. You cabbies in London are a vital part of its infrastructure. We're going to head from London down to Canterbury, where we've got Meg on the line. Hi, Meg.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm tremendous. What's on your mind?
Well, I just am 94. I'm disabled. I have to do everything for myself unless I manage to get someone to do it for me, which is difficult. And all I hear is people moaning and groaning. This life is incredible. And looking back over it, I've had a wonderful life with very little money, and I don't have any heat on in the winter at all.
Good for you. Well, maybe that's maybe that's sort of one of the secrets to staying healthy. Meg, it sounds a little bit like my mother's house. I mean, for decades she didn't even have any heating. We had to persuade her. When I was about 10, we had to persuade her to put in some central heating.
Well, my house is 200 years old. There's no central heating, no room for it, and I have no intention of ever having it. I keep warm by putting more clothes on, and I don't keep moaning. I think of all the good things and all the things I'm fortunate for.
Well, that's fantastic, Meg. And maybe you've got a nice fire or something in one or two of your rooms.
No, I have not. I use mostly cold water, whatever the weather, because I haven't the money to spend on heat. Instead of moaning about it, I get on with it.
Get on with it?
Of course, because fortunately, being so old, we were brought up in freezing cold houses, and we didn't hear about the temperature every 5 minutes.
Meg, you are...
Get on with it.
You've got to get on with it. You are an absolute advocate. You're just, I mean, you sound rather like my mother. Get a grip, get on with it, stop whining and moaning. That's
all you hear is people complaining about everything.
Meg,
we are so fortunate.
You're quite right, Meg. We're so fortunate, and I wish you every success in heading towards the century and a birthday card from Her Majesty the Queen, hopefully, Meg.
Oh no! I hope she retires. Bless her.
Well, yeah,
it's been wonderful.
Well, let's keep you both going for as long as possible, Meg. All the best. Thank you so much for ringing. There's Meg. Her solution is just put more clothes on, and that's worked well for her for 94 years. Maybe there's a lesson in that. We're going to go from Canterbury to Amanda in East Sussex. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Richard. Good morning.
There you are. That's the answer. Just put more clothes on, Amanda, if you're chilly.
Well, if we end up with Rishi Sunak, then we're going to be forced into probably taking those kind of measures anyway, because the guy is such a snake that not only has he destroyed our economy, but he wants to continue that if he gets into office by forcing net zero on us, because he is very, very closely aligned with the World Economic Forum. And that's exactly what's caused the problems in Holland. That's what caused the problem in Sri Lanka. This is happening all over the world. The mainstream media are not reporting it because there are mass protests in Italy, lots of other countries, because of these green, insane policies. And Rishi Sunak is probably the most dangerous candidate we've ever had for the Conservative Party. The reason being, he's not a Conservative, Richard. He's a socialist.
Yeah, well, I call him, Amanda, a con-socialist. He's a high-tax, high-spending. He was obviously Chancellor, no longer wanting to be Prime Minister. And I just think that his policies are completely wrong. And you're so right. The evidence is there. The people who are heading more and more towards net zero are getting poorer.
They're all aligned with the World Economic Forum. Everybody likes to say it's just a conspiracy theory, just like Ian Collins is always going on about. No, Ian Collins, it's not a conspiracy theory. This is happening right now, right here, that's going on since the pandemic. They've tried to force these policies on many of the governments across the world, and it's working. It's been working. They've been working their way into government policy for years, because the World Economic Forum they've even bragged about, Klaus Schwab himself has even bragged about infiltrating government cabinets around the world.
I mean, there's no question
he's
that...
on video saying it. He's on video saying that.
There's no question that they're sort of these globalists. I think they sort of think they're doing right, but actually... the reality is, the evidence on the ground in different countries is that people are getting poorer with these policies. And my concern is that the countries that don't implement it are basically laughing at us.
Yeah, but they want us to be poorer. They're creating feudalism.
Yeah, that's the bit. I'm not with you on. I'm not sure they want to make us poorer, but I think, Amanda, that they like the control. They like being that sort of patriarchal, patrician-like attitude. I think it's more that than deliberately saying, I want you to be poorer.
Well, it's another way of saying that they want to control every aspect of our lives.
Yes, they
don't want us to be free. They do not want us to be free people any longer.
Genuine concerns about our freedom of speech and other things. Amanda, thank you so much for your concern and your call. That was Amanda. She thinks that we have to be very careful about the globalists. Well, the evidence is there. Those that push towards net zero push rapidly towards poverty and sending our jobs and money overseas. Anyway, it's been a full-on busy show. Lots of messages still coming coming in. Can we discuss here, Richard, great show, can we discuss Mr. Khan's plans to expand the congestion charge? I'll look at that, but of course we are a national station, not just London. And there's another one here which is says, why do the climate emergency believers always have to skew the weather events? Even if it does hit 40 degrees in London, the average for the last 4 weeks is actually 3 degrees less than normal. That's from Janie. It's a really good point. Context is everything, which is why I went back to the 1976 example where we had some 16 days over 30 degrees. A message here from Lois Perry says, here, Richard. And one here from about Rishi Sunak, that he's out of touch. About Kemi, disappointed. I think actually Kemi had been questioning net zero and saying that, you know, she didn't have an obsession with it, but we need to examine that more closely. Christine is concerned about Tom Tugendhat, so it's not actually clear who she does support. One thing is for sure, that there's lots more to go. The next vote's tomorrow. Tricia Goddard is on the other end of the line, ready for the next 3 hours. Good afternoon, Tricia. How are you?
I'm well.
Full on show ahead.
Coming up, of course. Yes, we're talking about the weather, of course. We're looking at pets and dogs in the weather, but also we're asking people about should you abandon the way you dress in hot weather. And I'm looking at you in your shirt and your jacket. You clearly, it doesn't matter what the temperature is, in the studio or out, you clearly have a dress code to which you adhere.
Standards, Tricia,
is that the right way to go?
Standards.
Well, a lot of people lose their standards. Well, we've got our face panel, as usual, Doctor in the House, where we look at medical stories of the week. Mental health matters. We're going rural. Lots and lots and lots.
Lots on Tricia's show.